Madison Correia is a member of the class of 2019. She is a vice president of the HS Orchestra, in which she also plays viola. Additionally, Maddie is a student council member, a writer for the Spectrum, and is involved with the Environmental Club and DHS Gives Back. Outside of school, she is a competitive dancer at Aaron Ray's School of Dance and a teen ambassador at the Zeitarian Theater. After graduation, Maddie is unsure of where she will be attending college, but hopes to study teaching English as a foreign language. As a student with ADD, Maddie hopes that her talk will spread awareness of how ADD affects today's youth and how foreign nations treat the disorder. Please welcome Madison Correia as she presents ADHD, Refocusing Diagnosis and Treatment in the U.S.
Thank you. So here's a comment you've probably heard at least once this past week. I'm so ADHD, or something like, I couldn't sit still today. I definitely have ADD. I used to say this too, and while these comments are usually meant to be funny and seem meaningless, I realized when I was diagnosed with ADHD at 16 years old that these comments actually strongly represent how ADHD is treated in this country, often thoughtlessly and without many regards. Before I go further into this topic, I'd first like to define ADHD and discuss how someone can be diagnosed with it. Oops. Okay. So according to the National Institute of Mental Health, ADHD is a brain disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. It affects 1 in 20 American children, and according to the Center for Disease Control and Protection, is one of the most commonly diagnosed mental disorders in American children. It can be estimated that about 25 people in this room have ADHD. ADHD is a term that was first introduced in 1980 and has been updated and redefined several times since then to have a more specific diagnosis. In this country, we use the DSM-5 manual to diagnose psychological disorders. The DSM-5 is a handbook that contains descriptions, symptoms, and criteria for diagnosis when diagnosing a mental disorder. While the intention of the DSM-5 is to standardize diagnosis, because ADHD can manifest into so many different symptoms, the manual often struggles to pinpoint if someone is struggling with a mental disorder or with a common universal issue. To explain what I'm talking about, here are some examples of the DSM-5's criteria for diagnosing ADHD. As you can see, this criteria is extremely broad and can fit most people. Now, just to clarify, there's a much longer list of other symptoms that someone must experience to be diagnosed with ADHD, but these other symptoms are extremely broad as well. All that this shows is that if someone is looking to be diagnosed with ADHD, it isn't that difficult to obtain. Because of diagnosis being fairly easy, kids who don't actually have the disorder are misdiagnosed extremely often. The American Psychiatric Association estimates that only 5% of American children have ADHD, but almost 10% have been given the label. Kids that are most often misdiagnosed often have unaddressed behavioral issues that are labeled as ADHD because ADHD's broad criteria can be molded to fit the child. This leads to an expectation of students with ADHD to be misbehaved, which has several negative effects. One is that kids diagnosed with ADHD often start to believe that they are helpless or a bad kid because of their disorder, which can lead to these beliefs about themselves can lead to an array of self-esteem and motivation issues. Those with the disorder that don't fit into this bad kid stereotype, that are well-behaved and perform well academically, often go undiagnosed and aren't given treatment for a disorder that they are blindly struggling with. This is where my personal experience comes in. I had been showing symptoms of ADHD since mid-elementary school. An example of one is when I'd be doing my homework at the kitchen table, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, would find myself twirling around the room, and this would happen like 10 times when I was trying to do my homework. This would happen when I was eating dinner, reading, or watching TV. Another symptom is my severe lack of patience that comes with waiting in lines, or just waiting in general. But because I was a well-behaved student that excelled academically, my struggles were seen as basic personality flaws, and it wasn't until I was 16 years old that these symptoms I discussed, along with several others, pointed to a possibility that I had ADHD. My evaluation was a pretty standard one. It consisted of an impulsivity test, a conversation about my medical history, and a test that was taken by both me and my parents where we rated how severely or how often I experienced certain symptoms. The doctor concluded that I had mild ADHD and had probably gone unnoticed for so long because I hadn't struggled much academically. So it's possible for my ADHD to go unnoticed for so long. Why is ADHD so prevalent in the US and often overly diagnosed? Well, first off, I can't speak for all people with ADHD. That was my personal story, and it's actually quite an outlier compared to most other students diagnosed with ADHD because I was 16 when diagnosed. One reason that ADHD is so prevalent in the US is because, as I discussed before, ADHD's criteria for diagnosis is extremely broad and can fit a lot of people. Another reason that ADHD is so prevalent in the US is because in this country, it's considered a biological disorder, whereas in other nations, it's often considered a psychosocial disorder that's caused by situation, not by brain chemistry. One of these nations that looks at ADHD from a different lens is France. Here in the US, 9% of American children have been diagnosed with ADHD. In France, that number is 0.5%. One reason that France's diagnosed population is so much lower than the US's is because France doesn't use the DSM-5 manual, which, just to refresh, is the American Psychological Disorder Manual in the US that we use to diagnose, disorders. In France, they use the CFT-MEA. The CFT-MEA, which is an acronym in French that translates to the French Classification of Mental Disorders, focuses on identifying and addressing the underlying psychological issues of symptoms, causes of symptoms, unlike the DSM-5 that just addresses diagnoses. The definition of ADHD is also more specific in this manual compared to the DSM-5, which leads to much less misdiagnosis. When I first saw that France's number of kids with ADHD was so low, I figured it was because it had surpluses of kids like me, who had gone undiagnosed for several years. This was proven untrue, though, when I found that in France, in contrast to the US, it takes a more holistic look when diagnosing ADHD and would be even more likely to find kids like me. ADHD affects all parts of someone's life. The French take this into consideration and understand that symptoms may appear not just in school, but in endless types of social situations. They use this holistic philosophy in treatment as well. Instead of American psychologists who mostly prescribe medication, with 62% of American kids diagnosed with ADHD taking medication for it, the French use observation of the patient's behavior, how that relates to social situations, and identify underlying psychological, not biological causes. While taking medication is a game changer for a lot of kids with ADHD, the overeagerness to medicate in the US often leads to a disregard of other techniques that benefit me and tons of other kids with ADHD every day. Some examples are mindfulness, breathing techniques, and exercising regularly. If US psychologists took a more holistic approach, my life would be different in several impactful ways because I would have been diagnosed and taught to cope with my ADHD from a much younger age, probably. If ADHD in America was observed outside of the classroom, psychologists would be able to more accurately diagnose patients, which would lead to a decrease in overdiagnosis, the bad kid stereotype, and the overlooking of those dealing with ADHD silently, like I did for 16 years. This refocus and evaluation and treatment is key to America's youth receiving the support that they need, and that is my key to the world. Thank you.
Olivia Marques is a member of the class of 2019. Her extracurricular activities include the National Honor Society, DECA, Medical Careers Club, Christian Fellowship Club, debate team, and participating in both winter and spring track. Olivia chose to participate in TED Talks this year because it was something she's always wanted to do, and she knew that she would regret it if she didn't. And she also thinks that this will be a fantastic public speaking experience. Animal testing is an issue that Olivia truly believes in. In her research, she has found that animal testing is cruel and extremely unnecessary. Olivia plans to study veterinary medicine at Colorado State University in the fall and wants to become an advocate for animals and help animals all around the world. Please welcome Olivia to the stage as she presents animal testing in the beauty industry.
Animals are dying, and we're responsible for it. today I'll be talking about animal testing, specifically in the beauty industry. I'll be covering the worth of the industry, what is animal testing and who does it, and what we can do to prevent it. Now, the beauty industry, according to Forbes, is worth about $445 billion, with some of the bigger brands in the industry, like NYX, only worth about $100 million, Becca Cosmetics worth about $200 million, Too Faced Cosmetics worth $1.45 billion, and Olay, the biggest brand, only worth about $11.8 billion. To put this into perspective, Olay is only worth about 2% of the beauty industry's revenue every year. What I'm trying to get at is that the beauty industry is extremely big, and I wouldn't even come close to covering it all in the 10 minutes I have today. So all of the brands I will be covering are all owned by the 7 parent companies that are owned in the US. These 7 parent companies, Johnson & Johnson, L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Shiseido, Coty, Procter & Gamble, and Unilever own just about all of the biggest beauty and hygiene brands in the United States, like MAC, Gillette, and Maybelline. It's important to know which brand is owned by these 7 companies and whether or not they're cruelty-free and if it has a correlation. But first, we need to cover what animal testing is exactly. Animal testing, according to Cruelty Free International, is any sort of experiment or test in which an animal is forced to undergo something that is likely to cause them pain, suffering, distress, or lasting harm. And in most labs, no animal makes it out alive. Some of these tests include injecting or force-feeding harmful substances. This is the most common form of testing in beauty labs. Animals will have products injected straight into their eye or test patched on a piece of shaved skin. They're also exposed to radiation or forced to inhale toxic gases. Now, you're probably wondering how many animals are actually in these labs in the United States. Well, it was estimated that each year there are about 25 million animals in the US in labs. That is equal to the population of Australia. A whole continent of people is equal to the number of animals that are in labs just in the United States. Imagine how many are in the world. And this number only includes what the US considers to be an animal. In the United States, only dogs, cats, bunnies, and chimpanzees are considered animals and make up this number. But if you actually add all of the non-animals, the birds, mice, rats, and frogs, the new estimated number is around 100 million. The 75 million non-animals in the United States are not protected under any regulation or law that pertains to animal testing. These 75 million can be tested on anything, anytime, anywhere, with no limits. Well, how does this relate exactly to the beauty industry? In 2018, there were still 30 big cosmetic brands that continued to engage in animal testing. And when I say that these beauty brands are big, I mean it. As you can see, brands like MAC, NARS, Bobbi Brown, even Giorgio Armani still continue to test on animals to this very day. Some of these brands could be your favorite, or you could even be wearing one of them right now. I know I am. I'm wearing a Benefit bronzer right now because I always thought they were cruelty-free and they always claimed to be on their website. But technically, they're not. And here's why. Now, brands like MAC test on animals themselves in the US or have a third-party organization test for them. But most brands that were on that list on the last slide aren't considered cruelty-free because they sell to countries that require animal testing by law, specifically China. China has very complex animal testing laws, and this graphic right here explains it pretty well, but I'm still gonna break it down a little for you. Like America, brands in China have the option of testing on animals if they want. But if you import any goods to be sold in Chinese stores, they must be tested on animals. The only exceptions are if you sell the products to online Chinese stores and just ship them to China, or if you sell to Hong Kong stores. For some reason, Hong Kong is the only city in China that doesn't require animal testing. And even though many brands like Benefit Cosmetics claim to be cruelty-free, technically they're not, because they allow for their products to be tested on in China. Benefit Cosmetics even goes as far as saying that they are deeply committed to the elimination of animal testing. How can they be deeply committed but allow for Chinese labs to harm innocent animals every single day? The answer is simple: money. Brands like Benefit Cosmetics are okay with selling to Chinese stores because they know they will make more money than just selling online. They would rather go against their own morals just to make the extra buck. So knowing that brands don't really care, what can we do as a society to help those 100 million animals? Well, there are a few animal testing alternatives like cell cultures. Cell cultures are any human or animal cell that scientists can coax into creating a 3D structure like human organs. These can provide a more realistic way to test products. Another option is human tissues. Human tissues are any healthy or diseased tissues that are donated from surgery or, sadly, from organ donors. This method has greatly replaced rabbit irritation tests because scientists are actually able to create model eyes from the human tissue. And it's significantly cheaper to use artificially grown tissues versus live animals. One rabbit Dre's skin test costs about $1,800 per test, while a grown skin model costs about $850. A 24-month cancer test on rats costs labs about $700,000. While the embryo alternative on hamsters costs about $22,000. And finally, an estrogen test done on rats costs labs about $29,600, and its cell alternative using receptor bindings only costs about $7,200. It's no-brainer that in vitro testing, which is any cell-based testing, is more cost-efficient, but it is also proven to be more accurate and effective. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health, they conclude that using in vitro testing instead of live animals is capable of being a more rapid, precise, and relevant way of testing. And right now, in vitro testing is most commonly used in testing the toxicity of drugs and chemicals, which is what most beauty brands are testing as well. Knowing all of this, why would brands or even countries continue to test on animals when there are cheaper and more accurate alternatives? Personally, I don't really get it, and I can't decide what a brand wants to do. So what can you and I do to make a difference? It's a lot more simple than you think. All we have to do is support the truly cruelty-free brands that do exist. Brands like NYX, Urban Decay, Too Faced are all committed to being cruelty-free and only testing on the alternatives I talked before. And if you're not sure which brands are cruelty-free, don't worry. There are some great websites like Cruelty Free Kitty, Ethical Elephant, and Flawless Impalas, who made this graphic right here, who are all committed to helping people find truly cruelty-free brands. These animals need your help, and without us, they're just living a life to die from dangerous experiments. Thank you, and that's my key to the world.
Samantha Santos is a senior here at DHS. She participates in a variety of extracurricular activities, such as DECA, the National Honor Society, the debate team, and the new Christian Fellowship Club. Additionally, she serves as co-vice president of DECA. Samantha is passionate about history and its importance because she thinks that history is the key to both the past and the future. I concur. Samantha plans to attend Bridgewater State University with the goal of becoming a high school history teacher. Please welcome Samantha to the stage as she presents History's Impact on the 21st Century.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about history's place in today's world because I personally love history, and I wanted to share the passion that I got for it right here in this building with some of our awesome history teachers like Miss McCarran, Mr. Bedard, and Miss Enochson. I just want to start off with this collage of careers and professions available to history majors. When you look at this, many of you probably see some careers and professions you're considering going into. It's pretty cool how versatile this list is when most people think teaching is the only option. And while there's nothing wrong with being a teacher and is what I want to do, majoring in history gives you so many more opportunities outside the education field. ranging from positions as governmental analysts to attorneys, and as you can obviously tell, many more. Moving on to why history even matters, the most basic but important reasons as to why we study the past are pretty plain and simple: to understand our world today and to prepare ourselves for the world to come. If we had no idea about how we got to where we are, that'd be pretty scary. Luckily for us, though, history not only allows us to know what has happened, but to make educated assumptions as to what will happen. In addition to reasons pretty much anyone can tell you about why history is important, another major one doesn't have to do with the events of history at all. The skills we gain in the process of learning history, right here in our classes at school, have benefits that exceed those classes this high school and can even benefit us beyond college. I know reading documents that are hundreds of years old sounds like a snooze fest, but it makes us better active readers. Along with our debates in class, where we become better critical thinkers and learn how to analyze at a much higher level. If you've ever had to write a DBQ in your history class, you know exactly what I mean. While we may not be fascinated by the random topic in the prompt, there's no doubt that annotating all of those documents made us so much more skilled at inference making and eventually essay writing. History also allows us to understand people of other cultures who, without history, we wouldn't be able to relate to or comprehend fully even. Being able to know how others got to where they are makes us so much more well-rounded and accepting individuals. Next, knowing history and the background of our own cultures gives us a feeling of belonging. Touching on something I already brought up, knowing how we got to where we are bonds us together with those who we share cultures and experiences with. Being able to relate and connect to people we've never met just goes to show the power of knowing history and its events. While not everyone in this room was alive for world-changing events, such as the terrorist attacks of September 11th, just being an American and knowing about the event and its lasting impact automatically bonds you to every single person in this country and creates a sense of unity between all of us. Lastly, history is important because of the international benefits that we get from studying it. This is especially prevalent today in the 21st century because of the globalized world that we now live in. World leaders have to take history into account when meeting with other world leaders. For example, when meeting with North Korea, the way the US goes about things is radically different than with Great Britain. Foreign relations are very serious, and the history we have with other countries plays heavily into matters surrounding trade agreements, alliances, and more. Now, if you know anything about me or my love of history, you definitely knew that this slide was coming, but if you're just looking at this very confused, I love JFK. I'm going to try to keep it together, but this is when and where I found my love of history, so I might get a little excited. But the funny part is that I actually didn't even care about history until my US 2 class. I mean, I liked it, it was okay, and I did well, but I didn't really care about it. Not until we learned about JFK's assassination. Not to sound oddly sadistic, but it was so interesting to me. And I'm a big fan of conspiracy theories, so as you can probably guess if you know anything about his assassination, I had no trouble finding documentary after documentary on Netflix, which I watched for a solid week straight after we first learned about it. Since then, I've been to his museum in Boston, and I'm going to Dallas with my dad to see the assassination site and tour the building that Lee Harvey Oswald shot him from. Now, I'm not saying that there's some historical event that's going to change your life, give you an undying passion for history, and make you want to teach it forever, but I can promise you that something has happened since the beginning of time that you can find interesting. You just have to know where to look. Now, as much as I would love to keep talking about the best-looking president the United States has ever had, I probably shouldn't. Getting back on track, one world leader who understood the importance of history was the Prime Minister of England during World War II, Winston Churchill, who once said the famous quote, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Believe it or not, Winston Churchill wasn't the first person to feel this way, or even say this quote. He actually just rephrased an earlier version of it, originally spoken by Irish political theorist and philosopher Edmund Burke. His quote, which is arguably the most referenced and famous quote about history, reads, "Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it." To bring it back to the 21st century and how history is evolving, technology is without a doubt the biggest contributor to historical change. I guarantee everyone here knows exactly what this is: an iPhone. Even though most of us wouldn't think of Apple as an outlet for historical technology, it absolutely is. Right at our fingertips, our cameras on our phones alone give us the opportunity to capture some of the most important events of history. Events like this. So other than giving us the opportunity to watch Tom Brady and his amazingness, technology enables historians to paint a much more detailed and accurate picture of the past. This can be through new discoveries using updated and current technology, or through using that technology to relook at prior discoveries and learn things we either may have mistaken or have had no way of knowing about until these new technological innovations. A lot of you probably remember learning about this artifact in middle school. Lucy, the early hominid, was discovered almost 50 years ago. Thanks to technology then and now, we have a much more accurate idea of what the earliest humans looked like, which is kind of important to know. Personally, one of my favorite ways that technology has educated people about the world is through cartography. To me, seeing the way other people saw the world is kind of crazy. This map, wrong way. This map is how humans viewed the world around the 2nd century AD, according to the Roman mathematician and geographer Ptolemy. Fast forward about 1,000 years to this map, and we still aren't anywhere close to the world we know today. It isn't until we get to the 14 to 1500s that we start seeing maps that make any sense to most of us. Thankfully, technology allows us to get to this, and even go as far as this, thanks to NASA. Obviously, history is important and matters, and fortunately for us, we can play a role in Earth's story, if we use our time wisely. The teenagers in Parkland, Florida are doing just that. After the traumatic shooting they went through, they still, almost a year later, are using their voices and have just as much drive for their cause as they did right after the tragedy. Now, I'm not a math person, I can't do math to save my life, but let's just assume that we'll all live to be 85 years old, to keep the numbers nice and simple. If you multiply 24 by 365 to figure the amount of hours in 1 year, you get 8,760 hours. Given that we'll live to 85, that comes out to 744,600 hours on this planet. 700,000 hours is more than enough time to leave this world a better place than we found it. But only if we use our time wisely, and we kind of have to. We can't afford not to. Let's be real, this world needs us. That's my key to the world.
Faiza is a member of the class of 2022. She is in the DHS orchestra where she plays the violin, and she is interested in technology and what it is doing to kids your age, pretty much, because of overuse. Please welcome Faiza as she presents the effects of social media and technology on teens and adolescents.
Oh, it's not there. Okay. Hi, I want to start by asking a question. How many of you haven't used your phone for more than 2 weeks willingly and consecutively? None of you? Well, that's really surprising, but I haven't used my phone in more than 2 weeks because I was using my phone excessively and social media excessively as well. You can probably understand, it's really hard to try to understand a teen away from their phone, or from being able to communicate outside of school, away from using social media, away from Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, or any other type of social media platform. I'm gonna admit, it was extremely hard the first couple of days. But all I wanted to do was just text and go on Instagram or Snapchat people. But after I learned the real effects of technology and how it affects psychology, brain development, and the internal well-being, it's made me rethink how much I really want to let myself have. This brings me to the topic of what I'm talking about today, the effects of social media on adolescents. This is a new culture, and it's a part of us. We're constantly plugged in. There's always been a historical pattern concerning technology and new ways of doing things and learning. We're starting to see the effects of modern technology now more than ever as a whole. It may come to you as a surprise, but the two biggest tech figures in recent history, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, seldom let their kids play on the very products they helped create and didn't even get them a phone until a certain age. In an interview, Bill Gates' wife, Melinda Gates, confirmed that their kids didn't have a smartphone but could only use a family computer in their kitchen until they turned 14. This is really shocking because these are the people who bought smart technology into our homes, but are protecting their own children from it. You can probably ask, why was this? Well, their answer was simple: the addictive power of technology. Here you can see a graph, and this shows the rates of the amount of cell phone use from 2012 to 2018. From 2012 to 2018, 48% of more teens had their own smartphones, and 46% were using social media multiple times a day. Researchers are saying that technology is rewiring our brains, how they work, and how we think. Thinking is the capacity to reflect, reason, draw conclusions based on our experiences, knowledge, and insights. Digital dementia, a term coined by top German neuroscientist Manfred Spitzer, is a term used to describe how the overuse of digital technology is resulting in the breakdown of cognitive abilities. In fact, more and more young people who've raised in the digital age are showing signs of short-term memory dysfunction as a result of their addiction to technology. A growing number of children and adults are susceptible to constant connection and overuse of technology damage, and this causes a brain imbalance, where one side is stronger than the other. Damage to the right side of the brain is found with digital dementia, and is associated with deficits in ability to concentrate, short attention span, lack of memory, insomnia, and emotional disturbances, such as anxiety and depression. I think we can all relate to these pictures. We are the first generation in history to be exposed to screens and mobile devices throughout all stages of our physiological development. If any of you have any siblings, cousins, or young children in your family, you can probably relate to the kicking and screaming when you try to take away a phone or an iPad when they're playing a game. This shows the addiction to technology starting at such a young age, like 4 years old, and social media entering their lives around 10 to 11. This introduces a whole other side. Our brains are amazing at taking in and processing the information, and we're still developing. Being exposed to hidden influences through social media and a variety of web-browsing platforms is affecting the development of our brains early on with our siblings and influencing us in our teen years. In a nationally representative yearly surveys, 8th, 10th, 12th graders' psychological well-being measured by self-esteem, life satisfaction, and happiness suddenly decreased after 2012. Adolescents and teens who spent more time on electronic speaking platforms or just technology and screens, and less time on non-screen activities had a lower psychological well-being. The complex part when trying to understand how or why this is happening is because we don't really know what's actually happening and often don't see it when it's already happened. As someone who was really attached to the use of their phone and the use of social media, I was the last person to see what was actually happening. I was more irritable, I was annoyed easier, I had no patience, and I was just feeling down. Now, the state never went too far. However, many cases, kids, teens, and parents are realizing something is wrong way too late. Okay, this has a further lead onto depression. A study showed that an 8th grader's risk for depression jumps 27% when he or she uses social media. Someone who uses their phone 3 hours or more a day is more likely to be suicidal. These numbers are driving past homicide, with smartphones being the driving force. You might not think that 27% is a lot, but if you think of it as you're on a cliff and you're 27% closer to falling off, that makes a huge difference. Here you can see a graph, and this shows the suicide rates starting from 1994 when there was a really big peak. It started to steadily decrease until 2006 and 2014, when it's been steadily rising. The suicides from social media specifically are generally cases of cyberbullying. Cyberbullies mainly hide just behind their screens and torment their victims, especially by making people feel self-shame, depreciating people's self-values, and crushing their self-love. Research conducted has shown new vitalities concerning technologies and media specifically results in aggression, sexual behavior like meaning for sex or drugs, substance abuse, disordered eating, and academic difficulties. This connects with the research concerning the brain development being influenced early on from early ages from exposure of social influences from media and TV. So what is it now? Well, culture is changing, and technology is becoming a bigger and more important part of our lives, and I believe it's up to us as a new generation to make sure we take charge of our own lives as the way we see fit. I believe taking charge begins with awareness. Aware of all the complexities concerning technology, and I truly believe we can all impact each other's lives for the better. Before I wrap it up, I want to say this is not to say at all that you should give up technology or social media, because technology has revolutionized our world, and social media has opened up so many new opportunities and changed the way we live. The only thing is that we need to be cognizant as a group and realize the real effects of technology and that it might not be everything. There are steps you can take, such as monitoring your screen time to time, or taking a mental break, being aware of the negative effects of the excessive use, and just trying to engage in things other than your phone. I'm not trying to sound patronizing while saying this, but as dreadful as it may sound, taking a small break or just moderating your cell phone use just a little bit can bring you a sense of freedom and help you reconnect with the world. Let's try to use technology and social media in moderation, because nothing of too much is good. And that's my key to the world. Thank you.
So does anybody have a question about these presentations to ask your peers here? Don't be shy. I'll come out with the mic. Riley, thanks.
I have this question for everybody. What was the research process like when you were making your speech?
How close should I hold it? Like this? Oh, okay. For me, I really tried looking at research papers and just looking at people who really know what they're doing and just reading like really the effects and trying to use like scholarly articles to find my information.
I just kind of chose my topic because I loved history, so I needed to find like reasons to back up why other people also love history and like it. So I kind of had to look at like other perspectives about history.
My research process was basically just a lot of medical libraries, very, very complex papers, not very easy, but yeah. Yeah.
Other questions? Don't be shy. Come on up. Sophie, wait. All right.
I have a question for Olivia. If the animals were ever freed from the testing places, what do you suggest that we would do with the huge influx of the animals coming into animal shelters, based on the fact that animal shelters are already overflowing with animals and animals have to be put down all the time?
You need to do one. Good question.
Well, obviously, we would want to send them to animal shelters. Being that I do work at an animal shelter and know kind of like the process of everything, it would come down to lots of cheaper adoption fees, like lowering the adoption fee prices to influx people to want to adopt animals, and also just trying to spread out to not even shelters in America, but maybe even around the world as well, or even build more shelters if we have to, because any dog in a lab, any animal in a lab can become a home pet, so yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, come on, Jamie Mata. Jamie Mata, stand up. Stand up.
Stand up.
Stand up. Come on. Don't be shy, Jamie Mata. We know you.
All right, I got a question for Samantha. What's your favorite conspiracy theory?
JFK. I can answer that one already.
So I have looked at a lot of them, but I want to say one of my favorite ones is probably either that the CIA did it or that there were Cuban rebels who teamed up with the CIA. Because there's roots that Lee Harvey Oswald was. Wait, what? Do you talk about that? Oh no. And there's I guess there's roots that there was a train that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to take, and it was along Cuban rebels houses or something. So I probably think that they worked together.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Don't be shy. Wait. Oh. Geez, you guys are really making me walk around. Holy cow. you stand up, please, and introduce yourself. Thank you.
My question's for Olivia. How come if these cell methods are so much cheaper and faster, why don't more companies adopt those methods?
Excellent question.
I'm not 100% sure why they're so cheaper, probably because they're made in lab. But I think brands don't want to use them just because it's kind of a newer technique and they're not 100% sure about it. But like I said, it has been proven to be more accurate and effective. So it's really just getting brands to understand that.
What's the freshman's name again? Faiza. How do you feel about the gaming community?
She likes the gaming community. She's all good.
I'm actually proud to say that I am definitely a very strong believer in the LGBTQ community, so I can say I completely support. Oh, I know. Oh, Gabe's. Oh, I thought you said gay community. I'm so sorry. I thought you said gay, so I was really confused because I thought you said, how do you feel about the gay community? I'm so sorry. Okay. Well, about games, actually, there's actually research. There's research that shows that games actually increase concentration because when you're doing games, you're double tasking. So actually, like playing games does help with the development of your brain. So.
All right. Come on, done. All right. Please say your name.
My name's Ethan. Okay. Okay. This question's for Faiza.
Hold on. Go ahead. Ask her the question.
Let's say I wanted to become a TikTok star, but need to use social media.
I think you're already becoming a TikTok star. I mean, go ahead.
TikTok.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Go ahead.
Would that mess with my brain functioning?
I think that TikTok is not the kind of platform you should be worrying about. I think you can definitely become a TikTok star and do whatever you want, and I think your brain hopefully will be fine. So let's go TikTok.
Any other questions? Is it serious? For real? Okay.
Oh yeah. Olivia, how you doing? What kind of animal shelter do you work at? Like, where? Where is it?
That's your question?
Yeah, where is it? Like, which animal shelter?
Add a little more.
Which animal shelter does Olivia work at?
And why did you choose to work there, Olivia? That's a good question.
It's the Fairhaven Animal Shelter in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. It's right next door to the Pasta House. What? Oh, why did I choose it? Because they allowed 16-year-olds. They're kind of the only one in the area.
And she wants to be a veterinarian, so she's trying to get in there as much as she can. Other questions? Come on. Do you have a question? Are you sure? Maddie, you have a question? No? My class, I know you have questions. Always have questions. Come on, question people. Always have questions. Oh, Devin does.
No.
Oh. Anybody else have questions? All right, model, let's do it.
All right. Is it Phaser. All right. What was I gonna say? What was I gonna say? Hold on. Oh, during your presentation with like the memory loss and stuff and like loss of
Memory?
No. Focusing. Like, I can relate to that. Is that like a common thing? Yeah, like.
Oh, so it was just
Are a lot of people affected by that?
Yes. He doesn't use technology that much, so he wants to know if a lot of people are affected by that.
So the thing with the memory is that as it breaks down, the brain like breaks down the cognitive abilities. So it's actually like slowly, it's not like something that you can notice right away. It's just like small forgetfulness. Then later on, it can lead to Alzheimer's. So it's a research that's leading to Alzheimer's, but.
All the research says that, all of it. All right, any other questions?
Vevo Duvet is a junior here at DHS. He is involved in robotics club and he serves as its president. Vevo loves the subjects of math and science so much that he doubled up the math and science course load last year. Michael Anderson is also a junior here at DHS. He, like Vevo, is a robotics club member, serves as the group's lead programmer. Vevo and Michael chose the topic of artificial intelligence as Mr. Smith's suggestion because it will become a significant part of the future. Their talk also ties into the areas that they love to study. Please welcome Vevo and Michael as they present AI, artificial intelligence.
All right, so this year, our presentation is on
aluminium.
No, it's on artificial intelligence.
Oh.
And this year we're featuring the elongated muskrat and Bill Gates. But
We will not be featuring iRobot.
we've all been forced to watch that way too many times. All right, so let's get started. What is AI? So AI is the principle that a computer program is taught to teach itself pattern recognition and complete many tasks all by itself. Now, you may hear the phrase, the program is only as smart as the person who programs it. And as a programmer myself, I'll tell you that's true, until it's not. So, that's where AI comes in. So, what is the most famous organization in this area for artificial intelligence, Fabo?
That.
Boston Dynamics. So now you may have seen this on Instagram, Snapchat, wherever you may browse in your free time. But this is actually a picture of this man right here pushing back a robot with an artificial intelligence system on it who is trying to pick up a box. As you can see, they teach their robots and artificial intelligence systems using brute force, which is kind of rude. But it actually eventually picked up the box, and that's great.
Pokey pokey. Yo, so y'all wondering, does robotics equal AI? Well, I got an answer for y'all peeps. Nah, bruh, no. Because robotics is like a robotics, and AI is like AI.
Robotics is more of a mechanical thing. Robotics is more of the mechanical side of things, and robotics is more of the programming side of things. But what happens if you take robotics and you add it to AI?
You make a Roomba.
Now, Roombas are very productive, and they try to stay away from animals until the animals eventually get on them. But Roombas are very useful. And why are they so useful, Vebo?
Because you cannot attach balloons at the end of them and make a knife or out of it. They are very productive. They do their job. Oh.
Now, the Roomba was developed by iRobot originally, but has since been manufactured by many different corporations, such as Shark. And the Roomba is probably at some of your houses right now, cleaning your house. So, Vebo, let's go back to a more laid-back, informal setting.
Oh, God.
So, right here, we have the elongated muskrat, and he's calling his best friend. Who's his best friend? Thanos.
Thanos.
So right now, they connect to each other like this, directly.
See.
But what may happen in the future?
Well, Elon Musk will be calling Thanos boy. But guess what? Guess what, Michael? Say what?
What?
Guess what? So Thanos will actually not be answering. Guess who will be answering for him? His assistant, Thanos-istant.
Because, as you all may know, Thanos is a very... So as you all may know, Thanos is a very, very busy guy.
Very busy.
So this might be closer in the future than you might think, as Google's Google Assistant has actually taken phone calls and answered phone calls, scheduled appointments for a woman's hair appointment, doctor's appointment, taking calls about appointments, and basic stuff like that. This isn't released yet for the consumer, but it might be pretty soon. All right, Vebo. What has AI done in our society to this day?
Well, I'll give y'all one example right there on the top right. Oh, first you got a big think. Think big. Then you'll end up with that. You see, there's a Russian chess player, you know, best chess player in the world. But then AI programmers are like, yeet, not anymore. So they just build a robot that plays chess like Gucci, like very Gucci. Like the robot plays chess so well that he beat. that he beat Russia's best chess player and now is known as the best chess player in El Mundo. World.
Who knows about esports? Probably a lot of people. But for who doesn't, esports stands for electronic sports. This is a Dota 2 match. For those of you who don't know what Dota is, go look it up, because I'm not allowed to say it up here. So this man right here is holding a USB flash drive, and that USB drive actually has Elon Musk's OpenAI on it, and that competed against the #1 Dota 2 players in the world and beat every single one of them one by one.
CC. Also, Roomba.
And as we also said before, Boston Dynamics. So Vebo, what does AI do outside of the world?
Wait. Did you just say outside of the world? Wait, that reminds me of someone. Wait. N E I L D. DeGrasse Tyson.
So Vebo, what exactly does Neil have to do with all this?
Well, there's this program, you know, called AEGIS, Autonomous Exploration for Gathering Increased Science.
And who's it made by, Vebo?
NASA boys.
So this is actually used in the Mars rover, and the Mars rover uses this to explore Mars, pretty much, that's about it. But it basically tells the Mars rover where to go, where it has already been, and what to find. Our poor friend, elongated muskrat, surely cannot do this himself, so he is very sad that NASA has pulled ahead on this one.
CC.
All right, so you're on your phone or your laptop or your desktop, and you're sitting there and you're watching your favorite YouTube video. Because let's be honest, who hasn't watched this by now? And then Facebook pops up. Some Facebook ad about artificial intelligence. Now, while they might just be talking about their CEO, the Zuckerberg, who still needs a booster seat, Facebook has actually created its own AI systems, which have created their own language, and then they said, man, that's creepy, Zuckerberg, just like you. Let's shut it down. So that also shows how there are some flaws in AI and how it's really not there yet, and how ethics also plays a huge role into this topic. Another place we can say AI. Who watched the Super Bowl? Everyone, don't answer that. So this is the Super Bowl halftime show. Now, Vebo, what didn't we get at the Super Bowl halftime show?
Not this. Sweet, sweet, sweet victory, yeah.
We did it for you since the NFL wouldn't. All right, so those love stars in the sky, they're actually stars. They're Intel's drone systems, and those are run off of artificial intelligence as well, and that tells them where to go and how to spell out the letters, unfortunately not over SpongeBob's head. So another place you may have seen artificial intelligence and robotics working hand in hand, Stop and Shop. So this is Stop & Shop's robot, Marty. And if you've been to Stop & Shop recently, you've probably attempted to hug him, and he probably beeped at you. So Marty has actually been incorporated into many other superstores like Stop & Shop. So the first time you probably went to Stop & Shop saw us, you were probably like, "Ma, what is that?" Just like SpongeBob is saying right here. Well, Marty basically patrols Stop & Shop and detects floods and is a security robot. And it's really cool because it uses artificial intelligence to scan its position and try to move around as much as it possibly can in the right position. To date, it has only knocked over the soda shelf once. All right, so Vebo, obviously there's some problems because nothing's perfect.
See.
What are the problems here?
Well, famous people like Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, and Jeff Bezos said AI is no Gucci for the future. No.
And they actually said that it's going to destroy the world. And Elon Musk even said it's going to start World War III, which, depending on your beliefs, that's ridiculous. So poor old Jeff Bezos, he's a really grumpy man, you know, the divorce and everything. So let's make him happy with his own logo.
Happy.
So now he's a happy man. So maybe he'll stop rashing on our artificial intelligence all the time. So Vebo, now that we've talked about artificial intelligence for a while, what can we do at Dartmouth High School to get ourselves involved in that?
Yo, join the robotics team in Mr. Brodsky's class at A01. You might be featured in the principal's Twitter account.
Because who doesn't want to be featured on the principal's Twitter account?
That guy seems familiar.
All right. So unfortunately, our presentation is coming to an end. Vebo, what?
I'm sorry.
Vebo, what are you doing? I think we have one more person to thank.
Wait. Mr. Smith!
I have a bow tie on, I can't get it. There we go. All right. I've got one too. We're both repping the Mr. Smith merch. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for giving us the inspiration for this presentation. I'm Michael Anderson, that's Fable Dubé, and that's our Tech Talk for this year. Thank you.
Mackenzie is a senior and presented a TED Talk last year. She is the current Vice President of Theater, a member of both the winter and spring track teams, and is involved in our school council. She plans on majoring in biology at Quinnipiac University with the hope of becoming a surgeon in the future. This year, Mackenzie will be speaking about the lack of representation of females in Hollywood, specifically focusing on the pay gap between men and women in the industry. She chose this topic because she wanted to spread the awareness of how the film industry treats women actors differently from their male counterparts. It is a great pleasure, and please welcome Mackenzie as she presents the lack of female representation of women in Hollywood.
Hollywood. This is the place where dreams come true. Creativity thrives here with its well-known movies and TV shows. Hollywood is the perfect place for ordinary people to make names for themselves. This bright light city is where the unimaginable becomes the possible. The idea of becoming successful in this area spreads throughout the country along with its well-known role models. With all the dreams of success clouding everyone's vision on what is really happening in Hollywood, people are missing out on the reality of how dark and negative the film industry truly is. Today, I'm going to talk about how the lack of representation of female in Hollywood. One of the main issues that sparks this lack of representation is the stereotypes in Hollywood. So women are forced to be seen and have a certain image on how they can be shown in movies and TV shows. This issue isn't only seen in teen and adult shows, but believe it or not, it actually starts with children's television shows and movies. So now in an interview with Oscar winner Gina Davis, she named a few television and movies that were affected. I'm going to be talking about two today. The first one is Finding Nemo. Now, in Finding Nemo, the majority of the cast are all male characters, except for Dory, Darla, and Nemo's mom. And now Nemo's mom doesn't really count as the main part of the cast because she actually dies within the first 5 minutes of the film. So now, Finding Dory was released 13 years after when Ellen DeGeneres played Dory again. Now, when you look at this TV show, Sesame Street, it first started out with 19 male puppets. The craziest part of it all was it took 25 years to add the first female puppet. And of course, she was shown wearing a pink tutu. They had one puppet representing the entire population of females. Is this okay? The other issue that is happening is the ratios between men and women in the film industry. There's this misconception that men and women are equally represented in films and shows, but the actual reality is shocking. For every one female actress in a movie, there are 5 male actors. In the United Kingdom, the ratio is actually split between 50-50, so why is ours 5-1? In movies, it's actually rare to see 2 female characters having a conversation with one another in a film. And the majority of the time that they do, the subject of a male is brought up in the conversation. The Bechdel test was created to prove this. In order for a movie to pass this test, 2 female characters have to have a conversation with one another just one time throughout the film, and they can't mention the subject of a male. So now this chart shows the percentage of Oscar's Best Picture winners that have passed or failed the test since the 1930s. A little over 50% of the films did not have 2 female characters talk to one another without the subject of a male. So now this next chart I'm going to show you takes this chart and breaks it down by decades. Now, as you can see here, in the 1930s, 60% of the movies actually passed. But if you go back to our current decade, less than 40% has passed. So why are we going backwards? So now this next chart I'm going to show you compares males and females and the amount of words spoken in each of the Best Picture films in the Oscars throughout every year, starting from the 1990s. This chart starts out with characters that have spoken over 100 words or more, so it's mostly focused on the main characters of the film. Now, if you look here, in 2003, Chicago, with the film Chicago, women actually spoke more than men. But compared to all the rest of the data, men have way more words spoken compared to women. Now, the issue is not just seen with actors and actresses on films, but it's actually happening behind the scenes as well. Being a female director in Hollywood is extremely difficult. Producers tend to stick with the same film directors they worked before in the past, and the majority of the time that was always males. So now for every female director in Hollywood, there's actually 24 male directors. In 2016, female directors made up 7% of the top 250 highest gross-paying films. The film Wonder Woman, that was directed by Patty Jenkins, set box office records and became an amazing achievement for female directors. 11 days after the movie premiered, its worldwide gross was $435.5 million. Now, another issue in the industry is the pay gap between men and women. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act was passed, which required men and women in the same workplace working the same amount of hours to be paid the same amount. This clearly wasn't the case in 2014. During this time, there was a Sony hack leak that ended up leaking actors and actresses' salaries. The most famous actresses that year were Jennifer Lawrence, Natalie Portman, and Amy Adams. Now, when the salaries were revealed, it showed that they got paid more than their co-stars, even though all of them were nominated for Oscars that year. According to Lawrence, she didn't question her salary at the time because she didn't want to seem bratty or spoiled. And that's understandable in most cases because only 43% of the entire workforce would actually ask for a pay raise, and the 23% that said no, it was because they were uncomfortable asking. Now, in 2016, the list of Hollywood's highest paid actors and actresses were released, and Jennifer Lawrence was, of course, number 1, and she reportedly made $46 million that year. Now, Scarlett Johansson was ranked 2nd, and she made $35.5 million. So there's roughly a $10 million gap between the two. Now, when you look at the highest paid male actors of that year, Robert Downey Jr. was ranked number 1, and he made $80 million, almost double the amount that Lawrence made. And the second highest paid male actor that year was only $3 million behind. So why is there a huge gap between the female actresses and such a small one for the male actors? Now, the list of the highest paid actors in 2017 was no surprise either. Mark Wahlberg was ranked number 1, and he made over $68 million that year. The highest paid female was Emma Stone, and she made $26 million. Wahlberg made well over the amount that Emma Stone made, and during that same year, her co-star Ryan Gosling made $29 million, $3 million more than her. Now, if you were to combine these two lists together, Emma Stone would be ranked 14 overall, even though she's the #1 female actress. 16 males made it over the $20 mark that year, where only 3 females made it over that. Now, the list for 2018 highest paid actors was even worse. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was ranked 2nd, and he made over $124 million. Now, Scarlett Johansson was ranked 1st this year, and she made $40.5 million. The Rock made triple the amount that Johansson made. And the reason why I didn't choose the first highest paid actor was because he ended up selling his company. This was George Clooney, and so he made more than expected, so I felt like the data wouldn't be as accurate. So now when movies finally premiere in theaters, actors usually get a percentage of the box office profits. It's a proven fact that a working woman in America makes about 78% of their male coworkers. Now, when the film American Hustle was released, Lawrence and Adams ended up getting 7% of the box office profits, but now their male co-stars Cooper and Bale received 9%. The majority of the industry is well aware of this pay gap between men and women, so it makes it even harder for women to turn down an offer in Hollywood because they can easily be replaced. Overall, the work environment for females is unfair. Acting requires the same level of skills for both men and women in the industry. They should be receiving the same amount of pay along with being equally represented in movies and TV shows. It's not right to pass a law to prevent the pay gap and not follow through on it. The standards that women are being held at to talk and act and look a certain way is rather difficult and quite frankly impossible. They should be treated with just as much respect as the men in the industry. Women should not be held to these impossible standards. As insignificant as it may seem, we consumers can actually help in leveling out the playing field. The next time you are buying a movie ticket, choose the film with a female lead or a female director. This can not only help female creators get the recognition they deserve, but also inspire young women to step up in the film industry. It's time for a change and everyone needs it now, and that's my key to the world. Thank you.
Riley is in her junior year at Dartmouth High School. That is her first year participating in TED Talks. Aside from TED, she participates in several other extracurricular activities, such as the Dartmouth High Theater Company and the Harmonics a cappella group. She is excited to give her TED Talk and inform people on a subject that is extremely interested in. Campton Campbell is a senior here at DHS. He is a veteran of TED stage. Campton is very involved in the DHS Theater Company, serving as its president. Campton took on the role of the Beast in last year's production of Beauty and the Beast, and he was the narrator in this year's production of A Christmas Story. Campton loves poetry and is a member of the Poetry Club, the debate team, and is an attorney for the South Coast Youth Court. Campton plans to attend UConn in the fall, where he will major in political science. Campton and Riley chose their topic because both are very interested in politics and witness the growing division that is in current politics. They hope to provide some solutions. Please welcome Campton and Riley as they present Polarity in U.S. Politics and How We Can Fix It.
Just over a year ago, Marco Rubio, who is a Republican from Florida, stood on the Senate floor and said, "We are becoming society incapable of having debates anymore. We are reaching a point in our republic where we're not even going to be able to solve the simplest of issues." Now, after hearing this, Riley and I sat down and we talked about it. And we came to the conclusion that what Marco Rubio was talking about was polarity and the state of our politics today. So, what is polarity? To give you a dictionary definition, it means the state of having two opposite contradictory tendencies, opinions, or aspects.
In layman's terms, it's the phenomenon in politics where there is a growing disdain for the opposite political party and for those whose views differ from your own. In even simpler terms, it's the disrespect for people whose opinions they're questioning. Now, you may recognize these two men, the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, and the 45th President, Donald Trump. Now, most people have extremely strong and biased opinions on the two men. Likely, if they support one's ideas, they strongly disagree with the others. Or, in a more extreme sense, they have a disdain for the people who support the other's ideas.
In order to portray this further, we have a diagram put together by Pew Research. We see that over the last several decades, our politics have become ever more polar. The Democrats are moving farther left, and the Republicans are moving farther right, and this leaves less room for bipartisanship in our country. So, how did the U.S. become so polarized in terms of politics? Well, Riley and I sat down and we came up with 3 main contributors.
So the first example is social media. In social media, you're provided with a free, uncontrolled environment to voice one's opinions. And this leaves lots of room for disagreement, which often leads to disrespect. Prime examples of this are seen on Twitter and Instagram. On these social media platforms, people are able to, if they want, anonymously post their opinions. In response, people post theirs, which often leads to disagreement, but in a disrespectful way. Also in social media are echo chambers, where you only see social media posts that align with one's political ideology, which leaves no room for other people's opinions, which broadens the horizons much less. To further this, 44% of consistent liberals unfollowed people with the opposite opinions, and 31% of conservatives did the same. Although these numbers don't seem too large, with the number of people who are passionate about their political beliefs, these are huge numbers.
Another main contributor is how we as Americans utilize our news media. Oftentimes we have people who utilize left-leaning news sources, such as CNN, and they tend not to lean towards right news media sources. They tend not to utilize those. And this contributes to the echo chambers, as Riley mentioned earlier. This only gives you one opinion, and it doesn't let you consider the other side of the story. In this diagram, I like this diagram because it shows that there are some news sources that give more factual information, such as AP, and then you have some who just give plain-out opinions, such as CNN and Fox. You also see the way in which our news media leans. You see that to the left of the diagram, you have more news media sources who lean politically left, and then to the right, you see more who lean more politically to the right. In order to display this even further, we have 2 news sources. One that's left, MSNBC, and one that's far right, Fox. But they're displaying the same story with different twists on it. So with MSNBC, it's more left-leaning, so it tends to victimize Nathan Phillips, the Native American man who was said to be confronting the Kentucky kid from a Catholic high school. You tend to see them victimize the Native American and not the boy, whereas in Fox, the more right-leaning one, you see the boy being victimized more. This shows how our media system is able to distort what we hear and what we see, and this shows how it has such an effect on our politics today.
So another way that the US has become so polar is the amount of respect that politicians display for one another. Recently, the amount of respect has gone down. For example, Donald Trump has no issues publicly voicing his disagreements with people. In a recent tweet, he was addressing Chuck Schumer, a Democrat who is the Senate Minority Leader. In the tweet, he said, "I see Schumer is already criticizing my State of Union speech, even though he hasn't seen it yet. He's just upset he didn't win the Senate after spending a fortune like he thought he would. This displays the lack of respect that exists in politics because he is addressing somebody who is of the opposite political party. But it wasn't always like this."
It wasn't always like this. Back in 2008, when John McCain was running his 2008 presidential campaign, running against the Democratic nominee Barack Obama, he's going from state to state, from city to city, participating in town halls, answering the citizens' questions. And in one of these town halls, a lady stood up, and she voiced her concern for Barack Obama, thinking that he was an Arab and that he wasn't born in this country and therefore he shouldn't be president. Now, McCain was quick to dismiss this. He takes the microphone away from the lady and even says, "No, ma'am, you're mistaken." This shows the level of respect that we used to have in our politics and the level of respect that's so rare today.
So another good example is when Joe Biden was speaking at John McCain's funeral. Now, John McCain was a top Republican and Joe Biden is a Democrat. And he started his speech by saying, "My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democrat. and I love John McCain. Now, this speaks volumes considering that they were able to put their political differences aside and appreciate each other's characters as people. So, we were thinking, and we discussed what we could do as the new generation to lessen the gap.
We can support bipartisan politicians, those who are able to reach across the aisle to create meaningful change for our country. Representatives like Representative Cooler, Kristen Sinema from Arizona, Senator Donnelly, and of course, Senator Collins.
So we can also go back to the news media outlets that we discussed earlier. And if you tend to utilize more right-leaning outlets, then along with that, start utilizing more left-leaning as well, like CNN, MSNBC, or the Washington Post. If you tend to utilize more left-leaning usually, then start looking at more right-leaning as well, like Fox and the Wall Street Journal. This helps you broaden your horizons and look at issues from more than one standpoint.
We also can overall just be more open-minded. Be willing to negotiate change and talk about differences in our politics. You can, listen more and speak less. Surround yourself by people who have differing opinions from your own in order to collect information and to gather the other side's opinion and really take it into consideration.
Now, we still need to maintain healthy politics. So we're not saying get rid of polarity completely, as it keeps good conversations and it allows for opinions to be heard and utilized. We just have to keep it from becoming disrespectful, as it's keeping conversation from going anywhere.
Lastly, to know more information on this topic and know more about your politicians, you can visit Ballotpedia, C-SPAN, and headcount.org and learn about your state, local, and federal elections. And that's our key to the world. Thank you.
I'd probably ask the exact same question that I asked last period. What was the research process for your speeches?
All right. Do you want to say anything? Do you want me to speak?
You can speak.
Okay. So speaking for both me and Vebo, news sources, websites, basically going everywhere we can find reliable sources, reading one of Neil deGrasse Tyson's books.
And common sense.
And common sense.
Well, I know for ours, we watched a lot of C-SPAN because we tend to like to gather that political information, but we also utilize Pew Research because they tend to be reliable. But we also downloaded different news source medias such as Fox, CNN, in order to gather different sides of the story and different sides of the perspective to learn more about this topic.
For mine, I used a lot of databases and I looked at a lot of charts and diagrams comparing males and females for the industry.
I have a question for Ken's. So you seem really passionate about the film industry. Is that what you want to do in your future? Do you want to work on movies or TV shows?
Well, actually, I've been doing theater for the past 10 years, but I really like the topic of science and biology, so I think I'm going to stick with that, but maybe do theater on the side or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Hi, I have a question for Kempton and Riley. So you guys mentioned that the news from CNN and Fox isn't really accurate because it's not impartial. What would you recommend as the most impartial or centrist news source to listen to?
Some that I recommend that aren't as opinionated, if you watch your news sources, especially on TV, CNN and Fox tend to be more opinionated, so you come away knowing their opinions rather than the facts. So if I were to utilize news sources, I'd use definitely AP and Reuters, however you pronounce it. No? Yeah, AP and Reuters.
Hi, Mackenzie. So, I'm not standing up. So, my question, it's about the payment part where you're talking about, like specifically I was thinking of Robert Downey Jr. versus Jennifer Lawrence. And just like in terms of like variables, like Robert Downey Jr. has been a big actor since the late, like I know he started in the late 80s and has been prominent since the 90s up until now, like in the Avengers and all that kind of stuff, and then his bigger movies like Sherlock Holmes. So don't you think that that kind of plays a pretty big role in terms of experience and like how well known they are? Like Jennifer Lawrence has been acting nearly as long as him.
Okay, so that was actually a really good question. During that year specifically, Robert Downey Jr. was credited with 1 movie, whereas comparison Jennifer Lawrence was actually credited with 3. And although he's been in the industry for longer, and that does take into account, I was focusing more on towards the amount of like hours per movie and stuff. So I don't know if that answered it.
Yeah. Oh, gotta get my running here.
I have a question for Mackenzie, was it? 2 questions, actually. Does it take into account the box office? Say, if one movie with a male was way more successful, unfortunately, than one with a female? And also, 2, if I was a creative director of a film and I felt like a man was more suited for the role based on personality and character based off of that gender, why does it have to matter? Do I have to put a female there? How do you feel about that?
So those are 2 very good questions. For the first one about the box office profits, I talked about it in the film the American Hustle one, and during that film, they were under the same agency, so they actually had the data for the salaries between the 2, and it was significantly shown that they were actually getting paid much less. And for the second question, I personally feel like it depends on the character that you're trying to portray. So if a female were to take a male role, it all depends on the circumstances. Like, are they worthy enough to like play the part? Like, can they actually pull it off? So I feel like it depends on like the type of movie you're doing and what you're doing with it, like creativity wise. So it just depends.
All right, any more questions?
This is from Michael and Vebo. So the Facebook robots, what language were they speaking? Was it like code, or did they create their own language like English or something like that?
All right, so their language was actually created based off of binary, if anyone knows what that is. It was their own hybrid version of it, which is a little weird. It's kind of like a new language that no one understands because it doesn't make any sense, but it made sense between the inner mechanisms of the program and between the 2 communicating. Does that a good answer?
Nick is a member of the class of 2021. He is also a member of the DHS band, where he participates in both the marching and jazz bands. He decided to participate in TED because he heard that despite of all the work, it is pretty fun. Nick chose his topic of technology because of his interest in the subject, and he also hopes that his future career will center around technology. Please welcome Nicholas Fiera to the stage as he presents How Startups Unite Us.
Hey! Oh, wow. Good to see y'all. So, I have one question for you. Why is technology important? And I get that asking in this day and age why technology is important is like asking why is it important for me to breathe oxygen? But despite both questions being very simple, they need a detailed explanation so you understand why. First of all, 4 billion people use the internet in 2018 alone, meaning 4 billion people go on a web browser and look up YouTube videos, research data, cite that data, and much more. As technology has developed, so has the idea of everything being much more efficient and effective and easier for the user. Most, if not every job, has a reliance on technology. Every job needs some type of technology. And because of social media and streaming services like Skype, we're able to, technology can bring us together. So I feel startup companies are very underappreciated because of some of the products that they make. A startup company is a company that is in its first stage of operations, or more simply, it's owned by one person or a small group of people. They put so many hours into their products because they believe that they can make something that can improve society and still be very easy to access to the common people. And everyone in this room has at least one object that is from a startup company, and you use it every day and you don't even realize it. So this is just a handful of all the startup companies that we have. So we have Pinterest that shares hobbies with others. GitHub, which stores code on your phone, which you use your phones every day. Don't lie about that. And Snapchat, which is hands down the most popular form of social media. So why does this matter? Why does it matter about startup companies and what they make? Because as shown with Snapchat, their products are very influential. And because of that, it fosters connectivity and creativity among people. And millions upon millions of people use these kinds of products. Specifically, hands down, the most important app, Snapchat. So Snapchat, founded in 2011 by 3 co-founders working at Stanford. In 2014 to 2018, it increased from 46 million to 191 million, or in simpler terms, it quadrupled in the amount of accounts it has. And this is out of 7.63 potential users on the internet. That's a lot of people just using that, and using Snapchat, and that's a lot of people just, it's very impressive that in 4 years, it quadrupled from that number to that number. So as shown on the graph in millions, the blue bar represents Snapchat's users and how throughout the years from 2014 to 2018, it increases all the way up to 191 million, and is still going today because Snapchat is still around. So the 3 founders are Bobby Murphy, Reggie Brown, and Evan Spiegel. The 3 of them made it as a class project while working at Stanford, and it was originally called Peekaboo, believe it or not. The name got changed because of a cease and desist order, which forced the name to be changed because another company had the name. Many of their classmates tried the product out, they liked it, and told others about it, who liked it and told others, and that cycle just keeps going until, well, what we have today, Snapchat, which is one of the most popular forms of social media. The next 2 apps are very similar in what they do, but the difference is when they came out. Uber was founded in 2009 by 2 co-founders while going to a tech conference. The revenue of the platform providers was 18.6 million, and with a market value of 7.2 billion, it makes Uber the top rideshare app out there, with the runner-up being Lyft. Lyft was founded 3 years later in 2012 by another pair of co-founders. In 2017, 2.6 billion rides were given, with an increase to 4 million plus in 2018. So in 1 year, more than 1.4 million rides are being given, or billion. So the graph here is rather simple. Before Uber and Lyft started getting big, rental cars and taxis were the main mode of transportation. But as Uber and Lyft became more and more popular, taxis and rental cars became less of a necessity, and Uber and Lyft were used instead. Uber became so popular that it branched out to food services as well, being able to deliver your food while you're just still at your home. So, the two that made Uber are Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick. The idea was made when they were in Paris attending a tech conference and took 4 years to develop. It was financed by them selling stocks that they owned and getting millions of dollars to invest in this. Lyft, on the other hand, was founded by Logan Green and John Zimmer, originally called Zimride, and then it changed to Lyft. It was originally meant to be kind of a taxi for those attending college, so it was an easy way to get from college to your campus and then campus to wherever you lived. So eventually it evolved to working with over 300 cities in the US and Canada and ended up being the second largest ride-sharing app behind Uber. Now, Pinterest. A website that shares hobbies with others, so you may have heard of this. So it was originally, the idea was found in December 2009 with a prototype coming a year later in March. And it was found by Ben Silberman, but it was financed and promoted by Evan Sharp and Paul Sciarra. The Pinterest specializes in art and hobbies because that makes up 48% of the app or website. Despite some of the info overlapping here, as you can see, art and hobbies are the two main fortes of Pinterest. So Pinterest founders, so Ben Silverman took 4 years to actually make the final product with Paul Sciarra and Evan Sharp helping him. So despite all these differences, the takeaways are all the same. Each co-founder had two things in common. One, they all had a dream that they made a reality. They decided that they needed a new product, or society needed a new product, and instead of just sitting there and letting it happen, they're at least trying to make something. And the other similarity is that all their products have improved society in a way. It made it easier to talk to people without having to make plans, and you can do it at any time. It solved the problem in society. The main takeaway from this, though, is that not only is the world more connected, the idea of uniting with a friend or two and making a product doesn't just apply to startup companies. That applies to everything. Whether it's studying, making a business, it applies to anything, and that's my key to the world.
Aiden King is a junior here at DHS who is currently enrolled in AP Human Geography. Great class, by the way. He is extremely interested in geography and has seen how it is applicable to the everyday. Aiden finds that learning the very basics about math types can come in handy and is interesting for everyone. He hopes many of you consider taking human geography, and no, I didn't pay him to say that, as it has made him a more worldly and educated person. Aiden chose to participate in the TEDx DHS conference because he has watched loving the previous TEDx conferences and has had great conversations about the subjects that have been discussed. And he hopes to provide those same conversations for you. Please welcome Aiden as he presents Terrible.
All right. Hey. How's it going? 'Cause, 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 Morning. Well, as many of you might be asking, yes, this is a giant globe that's above my head, and sadly I can't throw it, but I can show it to you at least. And unlike my friend Atlas here, I'll be fine. It's just an inflatable, which means, in other words, I guess I blew the world up. Now, enough about atlases. I'll get to those later. For now, let's start with a simple question. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Vabo. There we go. I'm blind, that's the issue. Now, how many of us know what this number actually means right here? All right, allow me to clarify. These are GPS coordinates. It's actually the coordinates of Dartmouth High, and we are currently there. GPS is amazing, isn't it? If you were going to tell Aristotle, way back in the day, that you could use satellites to find any location on the Earth instantly with the press of a button, he would have fallen out of his chair. It's incredible. But enough about history. Today I'm going to be talking to you about geography, the greatest social study. Geography is broken into several parts, the first being physical geography. Physical geography just deals with anything that is naturally occurring, such as rock formations, bodies of water, and the environment itself. And thankfully, geographers don't stop there. The other part of geography is human geography, which deals with any human interaction with the environment, our world, and each other. This quote here is by a man called Harm Deblay, who wrote our Human Geo textbook. Ms. True just so happens to love him. He dedicated his life to the study of human geography, and he made it quite clear that it's not just about what is where, but who and what are where, and how and why. Now, how can we depict all this constant information coming in and the changes within our world? The answer is quite simple, with maps. Whether found on a scroll, a stone tablet, or even in a book of maps called an atlas. Wait, sorry, this type of atlas. Maps are very important to us. Thank you. Now, maps come in many different sizes and shapes. Here's one right now. This is a this is a cartogram. This shows data based on shading and distorting different places. This one just so happens to show what percentage of a population lives in an urban society, given whichever country you're looking at. And speaking of distortion, I mean, look at India. It takes up like a fourth of the globe. Now, here's another map. This one just so happens to be a Peters projection. A projection is simply the style that a map is shown in, and I'll get more into that later. But for now, just know that they can look kind of funky, and there's a lot of them. I mean, Africa is massive in this. It takes up more than India did in the last one. Now, before I dive into anything, let's just go over how to read a map. It might have been a while for some of us. 6th grade. So, first, every map has a key, or a legend, which tells you which symbols represent what. The national capital is the focus here, being DC, as most of you probably knew. Other symbols would include other cities, such as Houston. The map also has a scale, which shows you what the distance is in real life relative to whatever the measurement is on the paper itself. Other than that, you have your compass rose with the cardinal directions, and your latitudes and longitudes. Your latitudes running horizontally, like the rungs of a ladder. Ladder for latitude, yeah? There are 180 of them, 90 running north of the equator, 90 running south. And there are 360 longitudes, which run vertically across the globe. 180 running west from the prime meridian, and 180 running east. The prime meridian runs through Greenwich, England, which is where we base our time zones off of. Very important. So, oh yeah, that's something else. This map didn't actually have a title. Maps should have titles or else you don't know what you're talking about, so I put one up there. I don't really like the heat too much. All right, now let's get into projections. This is a Mercator projection, which is probably very familiar to most of you. You've probably seen it all your life, in fact. And each projection has its own strengths and weaknesses. The Mercator's is the fact that it ignores the curves of the Earth, which makes your latitudes and longitudes very straight. This made it easy for sailors to go around the world in whichever way they pleased and made math quite simple for them. The issue with this, however, is the distortion, or the stretching and pulling of different shapes of the countries and continents. For instance, take a look at Greenland. Like, that thing is massive. And other than the fact that it's green, it really shouldn't be shown like this. In reality, it's actually only 2/3 the size of India, with 2 million square kilometers versus India's 3.2. Now, there's a bunch of different projections, and the reasoning for this is simple. Since each projection has its own strengths and weaknesses, we might want to use different ones to analyze different places or how we view the world. This one is a Robinson. Personally, this is my favorite. Its weakness becomes its strength. It distorts all of the countries and continents and even the oceans in such a way that it makes it more accurate overall. It's like an average. It even includes the curves of the Earth, which makes everything nice and simple. Now, there's projections, but there's also something called map types. Map types are how you display different percentages or statistics for whatever you're looking at or whatever the subject is. The first one I'm going to be, percentages. The first one I'm going to be showing you guys is a choropleth. A choropleth simply shades areas based on whatever statistic or fact you're looking for. This one just so happens to be looking at what type of word you would use for a carbonated beverage, or as we know it, soda. Our area where we speak this certain vernacular or word is known as an isogloss, and ours happens to be blue. And if you couldn't tell, with the blue in the background, and my shirt, and this bracelet, and pretty much everything about me, I like blue. Okay. Thank you. And you guys are a wonderful audience, and I don't feel too blue right now, which is quite good. Now, thank you. Okay. Woo! Yeah, no, that wasn't it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here's the next map type. It's a dot map. Dot maps are very important. You can use them to find out where the population of the world is stored, each dot representing one thing. In this case, it just happens to be 100,000 people. And this can tell us what the population density around the world would be, or where people are more located than in other places. As you'll notice, there's a ton of people in India and China, as you may have known, Western Europe, and most of the coasts of the world, as these are pretty good places for people to start populating. Now, with all these different statistics and data that we can study, we can analyze the world in a different way and come to more conclusions. Maps are very important. And really, it's all about your perspective of the world, especially here. So, who thinks this map's just like really weird, right? Thank you. It's upside down, as you probably can read, or at least I hope. Now, who decided that north was up? No? Okay. Well, if no one disagrees with me, then north could also be down. Easy. You don't have to think outside the globe to think outside the box here. And when you study geography, your entire perspective of the world could be flipped upside down. But in the end, you open up your eyes and you manage to see a lot more of the world around you. One day in Ms. True's Human Geo class, which I take here, which I highly recommend you all take if you have the space, we were talking about housing types in America. And this one, the New England type, is very common around here if you might see it. Now, I hadn't realized why this house type would be around here. Ms. True explained it pretty eloquently, and I can't, so I'll just go for it like this. It's got a chimney, right? And it's also got shutters on the windows, and it's got strong windows against the weather. Probably shingles, too. One day as I was going to soccer after school, I passed by one of these, and I thought just how applicable all my knowledge from this class was, and from how much I love studying human geography. Now, all of this has changed me as a person. I've become more worldly, in essence. I now think of myself in comparison to the average person in the world, rather than just your average run-of-the-mill Joe in Dartmouth. And that's pretty important. The world is now in the palm of our hands. With it being so easy to study, we can learn so much about everywhere around us. Thank you. After all, how do we expect to change the world into a better place if we know nothing about it? Oh, by the way, here, who wants it? Okay. That one wasn't gonna pop, but if you do manage to pop it, I will congratulate you. And before I go, I'd like to give a special thanks to Ms. True. She's been very helpful for all of this, and she sparked my interest in human geography, as well as the topic as a whole. And so therefore, my key to the world is geography. Thank you.
Nina Lamar is a member of the class of 2019. She is involved in the Game Changers program, the Key Club, and is the cartoonist for our school newspaper, The Spectrum. Nina chose to participate in TED because she wanted a chance to step out of her comfort zone and to start conversations about issues that she is passionate about. Nina is fascinated by languages and thinks that it is extremely important to expose ourselves to new languages and cultures throughout our lifetimes. This is what led her to choose her topic of monolingualism. Nina believes that monolingualism is a growing problem in the United States that often goes unacknowledged. She is excited to be part of TED this year and can't wait to watch her peers' presentations. Please welcome Nina Lamar to the stage as she presents The More, the Merrier, the Drawbacks of Monolingualism.
Hay menos cosas que me gustan más que las lenguas. Español es mi pasión, pero algunas personas ven los que hablan un otro idioma como sucios y menos de válidos. Hi. Thank you. I can remember the first time I understood Spanish outside the classroom. It was a Saturday, and I was trying on bathing suits in the dressing room at Target. As I struggled with the strap, I overheard two women outside the door. Es demasiado apretado, one of them said. It's too tight. At the time, this didn't mean much to me. I continued, struggling with my strap, and then went about my day. I was in 9th grade, in my 3rd year of Spanish. Like most 15-year-olds, the implications of language learning weren't exactly at the forefront of my mind. But as I've gotten older, by a whole 3 whopping years, and more attuned to the world, I've started to realize something. Learning languages is really cool. And what's more, being monolingual kind of isn't. Monolingualism. If we deconstruct that word a little, its definition is simple. Mono, meaning one, and lingual, having to do with language. If you're monolingual, as I'm sure a fair number of us in this room are, you're fluent in only one language. And no, knowing all the words to Despacito does not make you fluent in Spanish, as I've learned the hard way. And if you happen to be both in this room and speaking more than one language, I applaud you, because you're in the minority here. Now, I know the whole monolingual versus bilingual debate is not of interest to everybody, but it should be. Monolingualism might not seem like a disadvantage in the modern world, especially if you speak English, but things like this are worth taking a closer look at. Today, I want to focus on 3 ways that being monolingual inhibits us, or rather, the ways that being bilingual offers others a leg up. Cognitively, economically, and socially. The United States likes to label itself as something of a melting pot, with countless cultures creating a diverse cacophony across the country. This is not the reality, at least not linguistically. 80% of Americans speak only one language, in comparison to the majority of countries across the world where most people are bilingual or multilingual. We haven't made any steps to change this statistic either. According to Pew Research Center, only 20% of American students in grades kindergarten through 12th learn a foreign language in school, in comparison to 92% of students in all of Europe. In the US, only about 22% of elementary schools teach foreign languages, usually Spanish, French, or Mandarin. In Luxembourg, 100% of elementary schools teach not just 1, but 4 languages: Luxembourgish, German, French, and English. Now think about how few of us, more or less on the cusp of adulthood, can speak even more than 1. And as time goes on, we perpetuate our monolingualism. Atlantic journalist Amelia Friedman reports that only 7% of American college students enroll themselves in a language course. And Gallup reports that only 1 in 4 Americans can hold a conversation in a foreign language. Now, I don't know about you, but as a future foreign language major, it kind of breaks my heart. Think about all of us in this room today. Let's make the math simple and call it 400. If we followed this representation of the world's population, 68 of us would speak Mandarin Chinese, 24 of us would speak Spanish, 20 would speak English, and 224 of us would be bilingual. The world is a big place, yes, but we can breach these gaps if only we learn how to communicate with each other. Something that I think we gloss over when discussing linguistics is that language isn't just what you speak or read. It's how you think. And cognitively, having more than one language under your belt definitely gives you a massive edge. Your brain works differently, being bilingual versus monolingual. Bilingual speakers have proven to be more adept at certain tasks, primarily those that challenge your brain to think a certain way. Take a look at this. If I asked you to name the color of the font, not the word that's written, I bet a fair number of you would still shout out red instead of blue. That's the problem with monolingualism. Our brains are used to doing things a certain way, and we hit snags when we're met with these types of challenges. Studies also show that bilingual speakers are better multitaskers, and I mean, who wouldn't want that? I'm sure it comes as no surprise to all of you that we live in a very globalized world, now more than ever with the aid of technology. Because of this, employers look for candidates with diverse skill sets that will be beneficial to connecting with a global market. Bilingualism falls into this category. The more people you can communicate with, the more valuable an asset you are to an employer. This can result in not only a wider range of job opportunities, but a greater likelihood of getting a job that you apply for. So here's Massachusetts, in the highest bracket of bilingual job listings. Fluency in a second language, or even just proficiency, is a great way of standing out from the crowd, and it can even help you earn more money. On average, bilingual people earn 11% more in salary than monolingual people, making bilingualism far more financially and economically advantageous. Maybe I'm alone on this, but I want to take advantage of my future as much as possible, especially if it means learning another language. On the other hand, we get away with only knowing English because the United States is such a global superpower. If you've ever taken AP Human Geo with Miss True, you'll recognize this term, lingua franca. A lingua franca is the language in which trade is normally conducted. In our interconnected world, this language is primarily English. In fact, English as a lingua franca, or ELF, is a commonly used label for interactions between non-native English speakers. Because of this, our mindset is often, if everybody speaks English, then why should I bother learning another language? What's interesting about ELF, though, is that most of these non-native speakers don't speak American English. According to the British Council, British English has status as an official language or a lingua franca in 75 countries. So yes, that's 75 countries worth of people who spell color with the dreaded U. Nuances aside, though, regardless of how prevalent English is, it doesn't mean that we should ignore other languages. Learning a language is never going to do anything but benefit you, I promise. If we look at this issue from a social standpoint, it doesn't get much more promising. Monolingualism more or less acts like an isolation chamber. Humans are naturally opposed to that which we do not understand. That much is true. But when we isolate ourselves from learning about other languages, and subsequently other cultures, they become something we subconsciously label as other, rather than something we like to get to know better or learn more about. When perpetuated, this leads to ignorance and even prejudice, because if we can't understand them or their language, we might as well not care at all, right? The Canadian Journal of Sociology reports that French-speaking Canadians hold negative perceptions of English-speaking Canadians due to what author Bud B. Cleef calls a fear of contamination. Monolingualism perpetuates a we-they ideology, wherein our own bias impedes our ability to be open and connecting with other cultures and groups of people. And that's harmful. This is the reason that we have such pervasive cultural barriers, obstacles, and walls. I'm not saying that this is an easy fix. Changing your own attitude takes time. Changing an entire society's is a completely different story. Yes, I wish that more than anything we learned more languages, and that we learned them sooner. But turning monolingualism into multilingualism doesn't have to start with some sort of nationwide initiative. We can take baby steps. Download the language learning app you've always been curious about. I recommend Duolingo if you don't mind being stalked by that little green owl. Try putting a little more effort and practice into your foreign language classes. Opportunities like these aren't going to be handed to you forever. More importantly, make connections instead of distinctions. Involve yourself in a language and a culture different from your own, and watch what happens. Maybe, and el fin, you'll find that languages are your key to the world. Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for our speakers? Question? you, Jacob. Come on over, Jacob. This is Jacob Bissett, senior.
Yeah. I have a question for Aiden King. How do you respond to controversies that the world is flat?
He laughs them off. Oh, go get it.
I think you could see this is clearly not flat, and it's also bouncy, which you will find.
No, back. Okay, who else? Come on up. Say your name, please.
My name is Ethan. All right. I won't.
Okay.
I forgot your name, but you in the white shirt. Nick. All right. I have my question in my notes app. Let me. Say I wanted to produce a software to make me a TikTok star as a startup. How would I go about that to make me a meme? Also, free 21, free Bobby Shmurda, and free TK.
Well, okay then. That was a question. I got some of that, but the part about you being like being a TikTok star, I think is that what was part of the question. It's all about like luck. Like none of the people that did any of those products knew that it was gonna be that popular. So I guess it's really all just with luck. So there is luck to that. So can't really answer that one.
Other questions? Thank you. Our speakers, fantastic.
Okay, so I have a question for Nina. I just want to know, how are you going to continue your linguistic studies, and what do you hope to do in that field?
Thank you. All right, Nina.
So I definitely plan on either majoring or minoring in Spanish in college, and I'd also like to look into either linguistic studies or international relations. So I'm not fully sure what I want to do with that yet, but I want to consider becoming a translator or maybe ESL or ELL, English Language Learners. So yeah, just kind of keeping my future centered in language.
Samantha.
Hi, Nina. So what was it that made you love foreign languages? Like how did you go about finding your passion for it?
What was your JFK moment is what she's trying to ask you. All right.
Well, I can't say my experience with language has been as formative as yours with JFK. But I guess freshman year I had CP for Spanish, and I don't think CP is here today, but CP, I love you. But yeah, she just had a lot of faith in me, and she recognized that I love language even when I didn't know it. So she really recognized a lot of potential in me, and I'm really grateful to her for continuing to spur me on and keep studying.
Miss Jordan.
Nina, are you aware that in Framingham, Massachusetts, all the students who are fluent in reading, writing, and speaking language get a special seal on their diploma? And it fits the categories that you mentioned, how it's important for job applications, how it's important to go to college. So this is what Framingham is doing. Are you aware?
No.
I didn't know that, but that's really interesting, and I think it's a great way to not necessarily incentivize kids to learn language, but definitely spur them in the right direction and let them know that language is a thing that will benefit them and not something that's a chore or an obstacle that they have to get past. So I didn't know that. I'll have to look more into that, so thank you.
Maybe we could do that here. Michael, come on over, Michael.
Oh my God. I have a question for Urey, also known as Aiden. So,
I've known you for a long time, and you've always wanted to go into the medical field. Now, are you thinking of going into the majoring in geography and stuff like that instead? Also, did we have Portuguese homework? Just
Ask him later.
First, I'll start with, Doutora, did we have Portuguese homework? I actually don't know. Okay, later. And thank you, Mike, good question. In studying geography, I found an interesting career that I might want to look into, which is working for the CDC, which would combine both aspects of that.
If you don't know what the CDC is, it's the Centers for Disease Control. All right. Please state your name.
Olá, Nina. Meu nome é Isabela e eu sou brasileira. Eu quero saber quantas línguas você fala.
In English.
Hi, my name's Isabella and I'm Brazilian. I wanted to know how many languages do you speak?
Muito bem, muito bem.
All right, I'm sorry about that. The mic kind of echoed a little bit. I couldn't hear you. So, yes, thank you. So right now, I'm kind of centered in, obviously, English, and I'm really working on becoming fluent in Spanish. I know a little bit of Norwegian, trying to work on that a little bit, but in the future, I'd love to delve more into Romance languages, maybe Slavic languages, just kind of all over the place. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and our last question.
All right, what's up? My name is XAQ. Got a question for Nick.
What's your name?
XAQ, Zach.
Zach?
Yeah. I know you're talking about social media and all that. I want to know your output on music streaming services such as SoundCloud and Spotify.
Okay, try Nick. I don't know.
So you want to know my output on SoundCloud and all that music stuff. So, well, they're good. There's not really much to say. XAQ! Not much to say, so sorry about that.
Good answer. That's what I would have said. Okay, any other questions? Who's A? Come on down. Easy, easy, don't hurt yourself.
Hi, I'm Jake and Nina, or whatever. Oh.
Thank you.
Ava Cafasso is a member of the class of 2022. Ava is a member of the indoor percussion band and plays marimba and vibraphone. She chose to participate in this year's TED conference because she wants to share something positive with people. Ava specifically chose her topic on the effect of pet animals on people because she's inspired by her own pets and wanted to continue to explore an area on a deeper level. Please welcome Ava Cafasso as she presents the pet effect.
So, how many of you have pets? Please raise your hand if you have a pet. All right, so that's a lot of you. So, when you get home, you put your bag down, you have a snack, and then you see your animals. You pet them and hug them and tell them how much you love them, but do you know what's happening inside of your brain and in your body? Probably not, and if you do, I'm impressed. Good for you. For those of you who don't, there's the pet effect to explain it all. So I'm sure you're asking, what is the pet effect? And how do animals benefit people in such a way that is healthy? The pet effect is a group of scientific research that shows how the animal companions, mainly focused around cats and dogs, positively influence areas like mental health, bodily processes, happiness, and the quality of life. Alan Beck at the Purdue University and Aaron Katcher from the University of Pennsylvania organized a study where they measured bodily processes as someone pet a dog. They found that not only blood pressure went down, but heart rate slowed, breathing became consistent, and muscles relaxed. This study was a clear indication of the benefits of pets. Before we jump into it, I'd like to introduce my own family. So this is Mustache, and he has lots of clothes, including the one pictured above, and he loves to nap in the sun. Next we have Reddy, and he's the sweetest dog you'll ever meet, and he also loves stealing food from the dinner table. And lastly we have the lovely Bella, and she enjoys eating and dreaming about food. She's also very fat and fluffy, and she's the queen bee of the house. So moving on, I'd like to direct the focus to the brain and to hormones that are released in the brain. So we all have hormones that are released into our bodies by situations or responses to things, and we all have 4 happiness hormones. They include endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. In a study by the British Psychological Society, researchers found that dogs especially stimulate therapeutic or psychological health and lower the stress hormone cortisol. In a 2017 article by Marilyn Gemino, it has been found that just being in the presence of an animal has been shown to lower stress levels. So in this next slide, we have a brief description of each hormone, and then we start off with endorphins, which reduces pain signals, and serotonin, which boosts mood and makes us more agreeable. Cats. So in a study by Cornell College, student Philippa Dennis studied the benefit of human-cat relationships and found that people who became attached to their cats underwent great calming effects from the created bond. Cats also fulfill the need for touch, especially for individuals whose illness prevents them from creating those bonds. So stress is typically represented through accelerated heart rate and high blood pressure. And in one study by the University of New York, researchers had 240 married couples perform 2 tasks, which were doing difficult math problems and sticking their hands in ice water for 2 minutes. And I don't know who would want to do that. That's not enjoyable. So some were alone and some had company, either a spouse, a friend, or a pet. And people had higher blood pressure and heart rates when a spouse or friend was in the room, but in the presence of a pet, they actually had lower blood pressure. So here, it's not shown, but this was actually an experiment where 67 Yale medical students were divided into 3 groups, and each participant completed a psychological questionnaire which measured their current level of anxiety. And here, the graph shows the results after no treatment, pictures of a dog, and real dog. And you can obviously see there's a very large decrease in people who saw a real dog. So besides helping out with mental illnesses, pets can also make a person's life better just every day and increase overall quality of life. And actually, therapy is a great way for animals to shine with their healing talents. And in a few short moments, we will be exploring stories of individuals who have been affected by the power of pets, starting off with horses. So horses are very calming and gentle creatures, and as a former equestrian, I've experienced what they're really like, and they're just amazing animals. And equine therapy is with no doubt greatly beneficial to oneself in many areas. So Brianna Bornhorst, the executive director of a therapeutic riding program in Clifton, Virginia, explains how horses help the disabled emotionally and physically, and she says that some of our riders might benefit from the connection and relationship building with the horse and their environment. One particular therapeutic riding student, Brian, his mother says that riding has helped his following directions and some really core life skills about getting dressed and balance. According to a study by researchers from the University of Missouri, the social skills of children with autism, particularly in the area of assertion, increased over time, and when there was a companion animal present, while problem behaviors decreased. So now we move on to dog therapy, which is probably one of the most common kinds of therapy there is. And besides dogs, there's actually therapy birds, reptiles, small mammals, and even aquatic animals, if you can believe that. Today, we're going to focus on this. We're going to focus on the story of two young friends, Zena, who was an abused and abandoned puppy, and this is Johnny Hickey. He is a very quiet boy with autism, and Johnny's mother, Linda, brought him to a fundraiser to meet Zena after seeing the dog on a Facebook post. And upon meeting the dog, she says that Johnny, usually shy and introverted, came out of his shell. And from that very first day, the dog was sitting in his lap in the car seat, giving him all these kisses. And she also says that he was the happiest child that she had ever seen. So whether you're thinking about volunteering at a local animal shelter or adding a new member to your family, don't forget the many positives of pets. They help us in so many ways to enjoy life and to guide us through life. And remember that people can find something to connect to in a pet that they can't find in anything else. And that's my key to the world.
Okay, Rebecca is a senior here at DHS. She is involved in indoor percussion, dance team, marching band, the school newspaper, National Honor Society, and Rebecca is very, very adept at art, as you will see in a couple of minutes. Rebecca chose to participate in TED because it seemed like a really unique and interesting opportunity, and she knew that she would regret it if she didn't do it this year, which is, of course, her senior year. She chose her topic because she herself is an artist and has a goal to be an art major in the future at Mass Art. She wanted to take a look at some problems that are facing professionals in the art community, and more specifically, Rebecca will examine commercialization of freelance artwork and could potentially go, and what could potentially go wrong when you commercialize art. Please welcome Rebecca as she presents Sellout, the commercialization of art.
Art, one of the many forms of self-expression and creativity in this world. It's also everywhere, from architecture to clothing to different products. Artists look around and they see inspiration. Many other people look around and they see a price tag. It's the commercialization of art, and it's not as good as it seems. Let me start with the basics. What exactly is commercialization? Well, in its simplest form, commercialization is the selling and marketing of a product for financial gain. A sellout, on the other hand, is someone who sacrifices all of their own creativity and passion just to make a profit. There's a fine line between the two terms, and it's often debated as to where that line is, since artists need to eat too, you know? But a common thought between a commercialized artist and a sellout is basically just what will sell. So it's not always all a bad thing. Commercialization of art actually allows for a marketing platform for freelance artists and also exposure to consumers, which means an income. This process is now easier and more effective than ever with the use of social media platforms such as Instagram. On Instagram and other like social media platforms, artists are able to reach out to a larger audience and promote their shops and products. They can build their brand and their aesthetic, and they can even show behind-the-scenes look at their process. Now, of course, not all social media can be great for artists. Take Pinterest, for example. Artists may not get the proper credit for their work if it's copied or linked incorrectly. Pinterest is now offering so many different ways to tag work to try to minimize this problem. So, going back to those people who see art and therefore money. They don't see the intricate process behind each piece, and frankly, most of the time they don't care. They see a marketing ploy, and that's pretty much it. These images above include work done by artists Connor Harrington, Keith Haring, and Banksy. Now, what do they all have in common? They all have something to do with commercialized art. Connor Harrington is a famous street artist who's trying to link the worlds between real art versus street art while also making thousands on his pieces. Haring's work is seen absolutely everywhere, and he's one of the most commercialized artists. And Banksy is an anonymous street artist whose controversial, bold pieces are eaten up by the media and hundreds of thousands of people. Now, all of these artists either make or made art, and they truly enjoyed it. There was still passion and meaning behind their work. Now, there's a difference between wanting to be a successful artist who creates to create and becoming a sellout who's just in it for the money. A prime example of this is artist Jeff Koons, who is questionably an artist. He's actually a former investment banker who used his skills to market himself as an artist. The catch is, he only has concept ideas. He has a team of people who mass produces his pieces and all of the materials. He doesn't even know how to make his own pieces, yet he's slapping his name on them and making millions off of these. These pieces, which are, by the way, just giant blown-up objects of things that already exist that are just made out of synthetic materials. The piece on the right there, which is a giant sculpture of Plato, is estimated to sell at $20 million. The piece on the left, which is, well, a version of the piece on the left, since there are multiple, sold at a whopping $58 million, making it the world's most expensive piece sold by an artist that is currently alive today. Now, critics have called his work tacky, yet why are they selling? He used the marketing ploy of being able to touch on human connection to familiar objects of childhood, and also people supposedly find these to be cute. Now, on a different level of commercialization of art is being appropriated by companies for their own use while completely disregarding the original intent of the piece. They see dollar signs and aesthetics, and that's pretty much it. Examples include Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Time in a Lipton tea ad, Hokusai's famous painting The Great Wave off Kanagawa in a Levi jeans ad, and Andy Warhol's famous pop art style in his banana painting with, for some reason, Orbit gum. And, of course, I can't forget Starry Night on literally everything. No, I'm serious, literally everything. I mean, can you really blame these companies, though? Starry Night is a beautiful painting that's beloved by many, many people, and companies use that to their advantage in their marketing because people will buy it. On the other hand, it actually ends up diluting the impact of the original piece since it's so oversaturated in the market. Another example of this is seen with the famous painting The Scream by Edvard Munch, since it too is highly commercialized. The painting is actually so sought after that it recently sold for $119.9 million, making it the world's most expensive piece to be sold at an auction. Now, part of the reason why the price is so high is because it's so commercialized. Basically, with famous paintings, the more commercialized they are, the more expensive they're going to be. Now, the question still stands, much like that with Starry Night. Is this now considered to be a branch of a sellout? Is the fact that this piece is so sought after make it just a mere commodity, or does the artist's original intent still stand? Now, art such as Starry Night and The Scream are also being commercialized through exposure in movies, TV shows, and even music videos, such as Beyoncé and Jay-Z's viral music video that was filmed in the Louvre and features famous artwork such as the Mona Lisa. Now, as I mentioned before, Banksy is an anonymous artist who makes controversial street art that often has a meaning or a message behind it. This piece here was created to protest the commercialization of art. The main idea behind it is that he would create this piece, and then he would sell it, and the moment it was sold, it would be shredded to show the loss of purpose. Now, on the opposite side of commercialization of art is the fact that artists' works is being stolen for commercial use, such as what happened with artist Eliana Esquivel, pictured above. Some of her work was stolen, and then that person took her pieces, put it onto their own work, and then sold that for profit. Esquivel is now outspoken about artists' rights and copyright laws on her social media platforms, and rightfully so. See, this isn't just one case. This happens to artists all of the time, everywhere. People are stealing their artwork for profit with their own agendas, and they're not even asking anyone about it. Now, the current copyright law for modern artists is that their work is protected by copyright law from the moment that it's tangibly made. So technically, stealing someone's art for profit is incredibly illegal. However, a lot of the times, artists don't have the financial means to get a lawyer to go after these people. Or, since they're freelance artists, they might not want to risk ruining their reputation through the social forum. Now, a big part of commercialization of art is consumer culture. The consumer decides what they want to see. Right now, for example, minimalistic art is in, since it's aesthetically pleasing and it's simple yet also intricate. Look around at popular clothing and decor shops, and I guarantee you'll find some sort of minimalistic art, whether that's on a t-shirt or a pillow. Just the other day, I was in Pakistan with my friend, and I came across this shirt, which has the same wave painting that I previously mentioned on it, just in a minimalistic fashion. So, what happens if an artist's style doesn't fit directly into consumer culture? Take a fine artist, for example, someone who focuses on realism. Do they now change their style to fit what the consumers want to see? Or does that automatically make them a sellout and feed negatively into commercialization? Especially with the current stigma around social media, artists may feel pressured to adapt and change their work in order to get more notice and more likes from people. So that being said, artists do change their style, but that's more on a basis of what's culturally relevant, how they can get their ideas across best, and just what really speaks to them at the moment. It's more of a topic of whether or not they're doing it for the right reasons. Now, a part of keeping artists from becoming sellouts and keeping the passion in the arts is through the consumer. Always credit artists when using their content, support their freelance shops and sites, and report any counterfeit art and stolen work that you might see. A really, really easy way to promote positive commercialization of art is through shops like Etsy. Etsy is an online shop where anyone can sell their work to anyone. Artists are able to sell their pieces on their own terms in a market that's designed specifically for this. Furthermore, Etsy is a place for consumers to find really unique gifts and pieces. It really is an underused site that's valuable to the artist movement. So, at the end of the day, support local artists, promote positive commercialization of art, and just keep being creative, and that's my key to the world. Thank you.
Jocelyn is a senior here at DHS. She has been involved in the marching band and indoor percussion program throughout her high school career. She is also a member of the National Honor Society, the student newspaper The Spectrum, the Fishing Club, and will be one of the co-hosts for this year's Mr. Dartmouth competition in March. Jocelyn has a passion for public speaking and enjoyed doing a TEDx talk last year, and we're so happy that she's joining us again. She wanted to present again, but this time she will be presenting about a topic she researched one day when she was wondering, what generation am I? And what does it mean? Please welcome Jocelyn Jerome as she presents Generation Z.
So today I'm going to be talking about Generation Z and answering one of the biggest questions our generation faces and other generations do as well. No, sorry, not this one. Okay, well, while I'm here, let me just take a moment to say that it's not, because I've done thorough research on this. If you look up the definition of soup, you will find that it's a liquid dish, typically made by boiling meat, fish, or vegetables in stock or water. And then I looked up the definition of cereal and came up with a grain used for food, such as wheat, oats, and corn. Now, this didn't make sense to me because it's telling me that this is cereal. But that's not cereal to me. When you say, I'm going to the store to pick up cereal, you're talking about this cereal. But then if your friend said, hey, what did you have for breakfast this morning? You're talking about this cereal, which is cereal and milk. But that cereal and milk is actually made out of cereal. So my mind is racing and my world is truthfully falling apart. I don't know what to believe in anymore. And then I realized the simple solution to the answer. There was a second definition under cereal, which was a breakfast food made from roasted grain typically eaten with milk. And there's your answer, eaten with milk versus in stock or water. That's that debate ended there. Now for my real TED Talk. So the real question I'm going to be answering is, what generation am I? And let's start by breaking down what a generation is. So a generation is a group of people all born approximately at the same time. And the word generation gets thrown around in many other terms. For example, you have generations of family. When you go to a family event, you may say there were 3 generations of your family together. You and your siblings is one generation, your mother and their siblings is one generation, and your grandmother and their siblings is another generation. Then you also have the term first generation. You have first-generation Americans, which have people who are immigrants, have parents, have a kid in their country. Those are the first-generation kids. Then you also have first-generation college students. This isn't the generation we're focusing on today. We're more so focused on the generations by ages and the groups they were born. Now, although you may see some conflicting information online, I'm going to be going based off of this information, because some people argue Generation Z didn't start until 2004, but we're going to be focusing on the 1996 version. And on the side, you can see that there are the names of the generations along with the ages they'll be at the end of the year. So let's talk about how a generation gets its name. Well, first things first is significant historical events that happen either at the birth of a generation or when the generation is entering adulthood. And then, of course, marketing companies play a big part in this. I'll explain more on that later. So let's just quickly run through the generations. The first two not so well-defined generations are the Lost Generation and the GI Generation. Lost Generation were those people who were in their adulthood at the end of World War I. They were lost in a spiritual sense, as in they didn't know what to do now that war was over. Then you have the GI Generation. GI, of course, being a term for government issued. This was a nickname given to soldiers. These were the people who were fighting in World War II. After them came the Silent Generation. These are the people in their adulthood who were part of the quote-unquote silent majority who elected Richard Nixon. And they were also silent because this was the time of the Red Scare. No one wanted to stand out and seem different for fear of being called a communist. Then came the baby boomers. You see, soldiers were returning back home from war and were being reunited with their loved ones, having marriages, and love was in the air. And people were having lots and lots of babies. Of course, I was going to say babies. Then after that came Generation X. If you're wondering for the age group on this one, basically think the cast of Friends. This name got coined from a book called Generation X by Douglas Coupland, which depicted different people of society as different characters. It explored a yuppie teen versus a global teen. And then came the era of lazy generation naming. This is Generation Y, more so well known as the Millennials. They were known as the Millennials because they were entering adulthood at the turn of the millennia, that is, 2000. And here's where the confusion starts, because I'm not part of Generation Y, but I well know that that's the cast of Boy Meets World. And those things that say 90s kids only, I also understand those, but I'm not part of Generation Y. I'm part of Generation Z. And one of the major differences between Generation Z and Generation Y is a matter that we're called the technology natives. Because unlike Generation Y, we weren't learning to adapt to technology in first grade or so forth. We've had it since we were young. And the people who are also in our generation still have the same experience. And all of this is really cool to know, but who cares, or why should I care? And, well, there's two words, marketing companies. They care about generations for many reasons. Mainly this, and this. Oh, and of course, don't forget this. See, generations help markets determine a group of people who they want to appeal to. By finding out people who all are the same age and have the same interests, they can figure out who their target demographic is. For example, let's talk about iPhones. It's predicted that 81% of Gen Z members say that their next phone will be an iPhone. And Apple has become one of those companies that is a trusted name, and it has a loyal market of people. So Apple, using this information, can easily say, hey, let's spike up the prices another $100. People are still going to buy. So out of all the generations to talk about, why do I want to talk about Gen Z? Well, there are mainly three reasons. First of all, that's us, exclusion of teachers. I'm sorry, you don't fit the age group. There's also overwhelming resources available about Gen Z. And although you may be saying, well, aren't there resources about every generation if marketing companies care so much? Well, more so Gen Z than any other. And that's because of this. Gen Z is going to become the biggest generation, making up 32% of the world's population. Now, although Gen Y is only behind by 31.5%, keep in mind that extra 0.5% we have is of 7.7 billion people. So I'd say that's still a fair amount of numbers. So what does this mean to you? It means that markets are going to start appealing to us. As we all start to enter the workforce and start to become more consumers, the market's going to have things that appeal to us, things that we want to buy so that they can make money. It also means our political impact is going to increase hugely because we're going to be turning 18 and be able to vote and also be able to run for office eventually. Then, of course, our problems are going to become society's problems. If you're like me and looking at college and thinking that college debt is a hopeless situation, it may not be, because you see, when we're such a big generation, lots of people are going to have the same problems, which means lots of people are going to search for a solution. And then, of course, society will face new problems. And though it seems like these last two problems are related, they are kind of, but they're very different. Let me explain. With our generation consistently having technology around us since middle school, if not earlier, we have arthritis developing in our wrists and our knuckles. And this is a different problem that hasn't been solved before. We also have phone separation anxiety. Other generations never had to get nervous when they didn't have their cell phone because they didn't have a cell phone. This is why students get twitchy when their teachers try to take away their phones. And then, of course, we have our reliability on online resources. It's not very often that teachers require us to get sources from a hardcover book, more so online. And articles like The Onion, although most of us know it's a satirical article, some people may not know what's the difference between satire and truth. And some people may put out misleading truths. This leads to fake facts and fake news. If I were to ask you, hey, you want to go get a tattoo tomorrow? I'm paying. I bet most of you would put in a little, if not a lot of thought in what you want to do. Because you see, your employers can see stuff like this. You don't want them to think that you don't know how the English language works, or of course, that you underestimate the Patriots. So believe it or not, we already all have some tattoos that our employers can see, and that's our social media accounts. Even when your social media accounts claim to disappear within 24 hours, or if you think you delete them and you're fine, your information can still be tracked. This trackable information is called your digital footprint. Digital footprint is exactly that, the amount of information someone can track about you based off of your online activity. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because our generation's digital footprint is going to impact us much bigger than any other generation's has. You see, if our parents post something on Facebook, it would have to be really bad, like something anti-Semitic or racist, in order for them to lose their jobs. But with us, even the slightly dirtiest digital footprint will lead to us not even getting an interview for a job. So our generation is truly special in the fact that technology has been around us so much. It means that we have so much more information available to us, and it makes us different from other generations. And it's not really uncommon for older people to say, well, I survived back in the day without technology, why can't you? And they try to belittle us for using our information. Now, although I agree that technological dependency is not good, I don't think we should be shamed for using the resources available to us. A comedian, Dave Chappelle, once said, "Modern problems require modern solutions." And although this became a very big joke on the internet, it still stands true. Just because you survived back in the day without technology doesn't mean that I should if I can use my technology to help me become better. And you see, another thing that's truly great about our generation is that the changing of technology, we've known it since we were young. Steve Jobs once said, innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not as a threat. And our generation has this ability much larger than any other generation. We grew up with change as a neighborhood friend, not as some type of enemy. We're used to it and trying to find better solutions, find cures for diseases, and find many other ways to make the world better. And you see, that's what's great about our generation. We could be much more than Gen Z. We could be the innovation generation. And we must make sure that we've been set up with great tools of technology in order to help us get to where we want to be. And we must make sure that we keep going and find better solutions. And as a little show, a little movie, Meet the Robinsons once said, we must keep moving forward. That's my key to the world. Thank you.
So does anybody have questions for Rebecca or Jocelyn?
No, of course not. All right, so look, I understand that a cereal is not a soup, of course, but is a hot dog a sandwich?
Come up for a second if you want. I think we should ask Mr. Higgins this one. Are you chasing me, Logan? Oh, it's not Logan.
Well, as much as I would like to say no, I had to run with some logic in my head, and I think that the answer has to be yes. Because originally I thought, well, a sandwich is two pieces of bread that are separated, but then I realized there's a grinder, and then I realized there are a whole bunch of variables I can't consider. So for now, I guess the answer is yes.
Sounds good to me. No.
Is water wet though?
No.
Miss True's blaming me for opening up this debate. I'm going to say water isn't wet. Water is a substance on its own. When water is on your skin, you're wet.
You're wet. A real question. Yay! All right. Real question. Here we go.
Okay, so I have questions for both of you, actually. I guess, Jocelyn, I would ask, what kind of process did you go to research your speech? Although I would love to ask you whether or not, like, a Pop-Tart is a ravioli, which it is. I won't. I want to know what your research process is. And for Rebecca, I want to know if there's anything I can do to support your art.
She wants to know if there's anything she can do to support your art, meaning buy it.
Okay. So my research process was kind of weird because at first I didn't know what topic I really wanted to pursue, and I was debating a lot. And then my mom posted on Dartmouth Helping Dartmouth about like the school not letting us communicate with our parents and opened up this whole can of worms of whether or not students should be dependent on technology. So then I realized, well, it's different for each generation. We face different problems than the other generations do, so we need technology sometimes. And a lot of it was just kind of like thinking in my head, well, how can I tie this all together? And I kind of did some research online, found the charts, and found out how each generation got its name, basically looking up online more information.
All right. Riley, you want to know like how I'm promoting my own art? I am actually in the process of opening up my own Etsy shop, which I'm very excited about. And I do have my own art Instagram. I am one of the people who use Instagram as a social media platform to promote their work. And I'm going to major in art, hopefully graphic design and art commercialization, actually, so I can become like my own sort of entrepreneur and make myself into an art brand, kind of. So.
I just want to let you know, Rebecca is super humble about her art. Honestly, it's amazing. I don't know if you saw it, and it took forever to get her to put her name next to it. So super, super humble human being. What question? She didn't tell me. Oh, she didn't tell me. Legit? Please don't do Pop-Tarts and stuff. I can't. Not a Pop-Tart thing, right? All right, so let's move on. Legitimate questions, please. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Yes. It's Chamberlain. Here we go.
I'm Senora Chamberlain, and I wonder if you have any ideas why your generation is very curious about questions such as, is water wet and is a hot dog a sandwich? Why do you think, because honestly, I've been around for a few generations and I don't remember ever having a generation so curious about these kind of questions. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Me neither, I'm gonna say. Why do you have to take the French off the paper?
Well, honestly, that's because we like to ask the real questions, I guess. And also probably because we like to waste our time about debates that really don't have a true answer. We like to waste our time on debates that don't have a real answer.
All right. I'm coming. Hold on. It's too long to go up these stairs. Legit?
Yeah, it's a legit question.
All right, here we go. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Cesar de Oliveira, and I got a question. Is it a good idea for artists to commercialize their famous artworks in objects and everyday in phone cases?
That's a great question. Good question. Did you hear the question? Okay, he said, is it a good idea to commercialize art from artists? Is that a good idea? Especially if you use like phone cases and stuff like that.
I think that it depends because, you know, artists, they do have to make money. You can't not make money without selling your artwork. Like, there's no way that you're going to ever make it in the art world if you're not selling your work. So how I've been explaining to people is that the biggest difference between being a sellout and just being a commercialized artist, which just means that like you're putting your art on products and you're selling it, is that if you're a sellout, you really don't like what you're doing or like anything that you're making. And so if you're a commercialized artist, like you still like what you're making, it's still you, it's still your style, and you're just putting it on product versus being a sellout and just having no sort of emotional connection to what you're making and just doing it for the money.
Thank you.
What do you think the biggest accomplishment is that's going to come from our generation?
Ooh, good question. Biggest accomplishment from your generation, what do you think it's going to be? This will be our last question because we want to bring everybody out.
So the biggest accomplishment of our generation, I feel like that's kind of early to answer, but as you can see, we already have people taking to the streets about the things we care about. There's a lot of political activism in our generation, which is truly great, such as Sam Moniz mentioned, the Parkland shootings, students who took participant in that. So I think our generation is doing a really good job at also being young inventors. And I mean, if you look at Ellen, she'll probably give you a lot of examples.
Thank you so much, girls. Appreciate it. All right, before we move on to the last part of question and answer, Mr. Souza and I have a ton of people to thank because, as you may have guessed, this is a huge, huge undertaking. And so lots of people deserve thank yous.
First of all, we want to thank the presenters who took the time to do this presentations. This is all voluntary basis, and they did a great job in preparing for months, and it is our pleasure every year to work with them. So we're going to have Alexis Arruda, Madison Correia, Olivia Marques, Samantha Santos, Faiza Chalova, Mackenzie Canyo, Michael Anderson, Dubé, Riley, Yustinovich, Campton Campbell, Nino Lamar, Nicholas Vieira, Aiden King, Ava Cafaso, Rebecca Benoit, and Jocelyn Jerome.
Take a bow. Additionally, as you can see, we have a massive video, sound crew, and tech crew up there. Fabulous tech crew. Thank you so much. So those people are Mr. Parati, the people from DCTV, Mr. Peter Chase, who, honestly, we could never do this without you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chase. Mr. Michael Fernandez and Mr. Daniel Medeiros, also from DCTV. The DHS media students, so we have Emily Chase, Kaden Lisa, Jamie Pedro, Andrew Reed, Ben Rue, Oliver Suarez. We also have our lighting people. We have Abby Tavares and Jaden Oliveira. And our art design, as you can see, we've added stuff to our stage this year in terms of our keys, so we thank so much Mitchell Taradash, who did a ton of the cutting for us, Mr. Brodsky, and Ms. McPhee and her art students for helping us. And, and our crew, we have Abby Arruda, Alex Baracino Long, we have Hannah Chamberlain, Charlotte Carrero, we have Riley LeConte, Andrew Lenz, Megan Pereira, and Ruth Pastor Sanchez. All of these kids have been running around all day long, literally doing anything and everything that we've asked them to do. And they've been helping all week long too, even though they're not presenting. They have been here with lights, they've been here with sound, they have been, I mean, you name it, they've done it. And they've stayed with us every single day this week as long as we've asked them to, in some cases till 6, 7 o'clock at night. And honestly, we cannot thank them enough for this, honestly. Thank you.
Also, we have a special thanks for allowing us the opportunity to have this every year. So we also like to thank administration, Ms. Ross Tebow, Ms. Rachel Xavier, Ms. Mike Martin, Mr. Christopher Boyle, Ms. Donna Floor, who helped us with our beautiful breakfast and lunch, Ms. Angela English, and also the ladies in the cafeteria for providing such great foods. Thank you.
So if you have any questions for any of our participants, and remember folks, have a seat people, we're not done. Sit down. Okay. Can you tell I do that a lot? All right, so therefore, if you have any questions for any of our participants, remember these kids are not getting credit for this in any way, shape, or form. They're doing this on a very volunteer basis, and they've been doing this for months. This is not just a one-day event, okay? So understand that they've worked very hard. So if you'd like to ask them any questions, now's your chance.
This one's for the AI people. The people who did the AI part.
So Vabo and Michael.
For Vabo and Michael, I have a question for you that is very important. Where can I get one of those shirts?
You can't, they're one of a kind. Right? You can start selling these.
We're actually ordering a lot of these shirts. We're going to order a package of about 20 or 40, so if you want us, come see us. Haven't decided a price yet because we don't know how much they're going to cost, but you can get one. Come see us in about a week or two, all right?
All right, woo! Any other questions? Oh, gosh. Why is it always? All right, I'll be back. Who's
No, I'll give it to Bert. I'll give it to Bert.
All right, I'm Jack Bernier. I have a question for Jocelyn. All right, how's the fishing club?
Jamie, come forward this way so I don't have to come all the way back again. All right, how's the fishing club? They fish.
I wouldn't say I'm the right person to promote it, but it's very good. It's probably going to be in full swing in spring when we can finally go out fishing. If you want details, see Matt Carroll or Andrew Bano.
Or Mr. Tweedy, because he's the advisor.
Hello. All right, I have a question for everybody up here. Oh, I'm Jamie Mata. Nice to meet you. This whole experience, what did you guys gain from it? Like, what was, yeah.
Excellent. Good one. I like it. Let's go right down the road.
So me personally, it's helped me gain a lot of confidence in public speaking.
I have to agree. I'm not the best public speaker, so this was like a really big thing for me to do.
Yeah, public speaking, it's really good for that.
I think it's really helped me connect with a lot of different people and kind of spread the things that I'm passionate about.
It was fun.
I'm rather shy and introverted, and I was told by my sister that this was very fun, and I can safely say it's very fun.
I'm just glad that I got to share my ideas with other people and allow for a learning experience.